The boys fought, the battlefield was covered in blood, and the number of wounded grew. They were carried to the rear as quickly as possible so that they could be healed. The girl was overshadowed. And just as she was getting ready to die, someone nearby asked why there was such a depressive atmosphere. It was a healer. He said that he was nearby, so she definitely won't kick the bucket here. The wounds are already healing. But the girl said that she wasn't talking about that. It seemed she was talking about those monsters. She was right. There were a whole bunch of monsters, and all of these monsters were high-ranking. The girl suggested that the healer run away, since he couldn't fight on his own. But the guy admitted that he was left alone. But the guy was going somewhere. The girl decided that he was crazy. She asked where the guy was going. The guy replied that he understood that she was worried about him, but there was no need. He was a difficult target. It seems our hero was confident in himself. He promised that he would never leave them here to die. Having promised to save everyone, the hero rushed to the battlefield. It seems the guy was no ordinary healer. The guys who were fighting the monsters didn't have time to look back before our hero rushed past them and rushed towards the monsters. They didn't even have time to stop him. The guy cut down a bunch of monsters at once. Our hero is definitely not a simple healer. In 2032, the world changed beyond recognition. Superhumans have appeared, a completely new generation of people. Some even called them messiahs, called to rid the world of evil. No one could really understand where they came from. Their capabilities were beyond human comprehension. And the goal is to clear the dungeons. They defined themselves as those who hunt monsters. The dungeons represented a whole world. Parallel to the earthly one, hunting in the dungeons was an integral part of the hunters' lives. After all, the creatures from there were their main source of income, while for people the monsters were only a source of problems. Horrifying monsters appeared suddenly. They arrived at the gates portals that connected the earth and the dungeons. Ordinary people without abilities had no chance against them. It seemed the earth was doomed. But that was before the appearance of hunters. Their goal was hunting, not protecting the population, but nevertheless their help turned out to be very useful. And for the ordinary people, they quickly became heroes and saviors. But for our hero, then, these global changes, heroes meant nothing. And all because our hero was terminally ill, and any day could be his last. After another meeting with the doctor, our hero was returning by bus when his sister called him. She asked if Hank had been to the doctor. Hank said yes, they just finished. He was on his way home. His sister called him to tell him that she would be late at work today and asked him not to wait for her. Hank was worried that his sister was pushing herself too hard at the job, but his sister assured him it was okay. The nurse asked what the doctor told him. Hank was silent for a while, then lied that everything was fine. In fact, Hank had a terminal illness that was unknown to science. Every cell in Hank's body seems to be saturated with poison. It's a wonder he's alive at all. After this news, Hank's body began to shake and he nervously laughed and asked the doctor. He has no chance. It's all so sudden. The doctor just apologized. Hank just didn't know how to tell his sister about his incurable disease. Suddenly a message came to everyone. She announced that the gate had appeared. Something that hadn't happened for a long time, and Hank was scared. The worst part is that the gate appeared right next to Hank. The monster appeared and already opened its mouth. The monster's vile tongue flashed past Hank and pierced the poor guy, and the people froze in fear. Then the language returned to its language. People finally ran away. The girl who lost her loved one could not just leave. So the man had to pull her out himself. Meanwhile, Sunny was at work. She was called for a break. Sunny worked a little more and only then went to lunch. A colleague said that she admires Sunny. Usually girls her age are more busy with dating and other entertainment. And she works overtime to pay her brother's hospital bills. She feels sorry for Sunny. But Sunny insisted otherwise. It was important to her to take care of her brother. He was her family. A colleague said that family was all they had. But now Sunny wasn't listening to her. Her face darkened in an instant when she saw the news about the gate, horror frozen on her face. Meanwhile, our Hank was in big trouble. The monster's tongue was now wrapped around his leg. He thought he couldn't get out, although he was doomed from the very beginning. But where are these hunters? After seeing the news, Sunny started sending Hank a bunch of messages, and Hank apologized to her. He so wanted to repay her for everything she had done for him. But now he would leave without even saying goodbye to her. All he can do is bite his elbows from his own helplessness and anger. But even Hank couldn't sit and meekly wait for death. Hank was angered by his helplessness. He remembered that those who engage in battle with monsters are rewarded. Their families receive benefits. Then he decided that he had to make one last effort for his sister's sake. And taking the shard in his hands, Hank screamed. Hank wanted to give his sister one last gift. He sent a stinking toad. The monster picked Hank up. Our hero was angry that this creature lived as it wanted, ate whoever it wanted, and didn't care about the people it killed. The monster didn't have much time to enjoy itself. Hank deliberately jumped into the monster's mouth. Hank waved his hand and plunged the shard into the monster's eye. leaving Hank's vision in darkness. He wondered if his attack had worked, but when Hank opened his eyes, he saw that the monster was still alive. All Hank achieved was to anger this creature. The vile monster grabbed Hank with its tongue. He really wanted to help his sister at least a little, but it didn't work out. He hoped that the bastards from the association would at least give him some money from the sisters. The monster opened its mouth and swallowed Hank. Thoughts raced through Hank's head. He thought, "That's it, right?" Hank thought it was for the best. He thought his life was meaningless. The image of his sister appeared before his eyes. He remembered how Sunny took care of him, praised him, and supported him in every possible way. She said that when Hank got better, they would travel around the world. That was her promise. The loving sister hugged her brother. Despite the fact that their parents had abandoned them, she promised that she, as an older sister, would take care of him. Remembering all these moments, Hank became angry again. His heart began to beat wildly. Now he didn't want to die. Suddenly the monster's body began to shake and then exploded. Pieces of the monster's body lay all over the street. Hank lay on the asphalt, his heart still beating. A little later, a bunch of armed people ran onto that very street. The news talked about how bravely the hunters rushed to the monster. While the news was screaming about the bravery of the hunters, Sunny was rushing to her brother. The guild leader said that first of all, he apologizes to everyone who was unfortunate enough to be in the affected area. They are making every effort to solve the problem as soon as possible. He asks not to go outside. While the guild leader smiled and stood in the spotlight and people chanted his name, Sunny ran breathlessly towards her brother. Hank opened his eyes. He didn't understand what happened. The last thing he remembered was being swallowed. He was surprised that he was alive. He had enough strength to get up, but his head was spinning badly. His ears were ringing and he felt unwell. But even so, he could hear his sister screaming his name. He turned around but didn't see anyone, so Hank decided it was just a hallucination. No, he recognized this voice among thousands. He still did not understand what had happened. But now it's not so important. My sister was somewhere nearby, and it's too dangerous here. I need to find her quickly. Sunny continued to look for her brother. She called out for Hank at the top of her voice, and suddenly she heard something. She heard a crunch and decided that there was someone around the corner, but she never expected to see a crowd of monsters. These monsters were finishing off the poor man. Sunny stepped back and the glass under her foot cracked. The monsters turned their attention to Sunny. She ran away, but the monsters rushed after her. Sunny ran as fast as she could, but suddenly she stopped, despair written on her face. And all because the road was completely destroyed. Sunny wondered if she would really die here. 1. Where is Hank now? Did he get to the shelter? Even at this moment, she thought about her brother. Sunny didn't want to give up. She still wanted to find her brother and save him. The monster appeared behind Sunny, but he disappeared just as quickly. Someone shouted, "The bastards lost their fear. They all went to hell." It was Hank. He was able to find his sister and save her from the monster. He continued to scold the hunters. Having no way of getting to this place, Hank shouted to his sister to keep her distance. They were not simple monsters. Hank had no intention of retreating. An ordinary man was going to fight a bunch of monsters. The fight was too unequal, but Hank didn't hesitate for a second and rushed into battle. He had no doubt about his victory. Firstly, the small dark toads are weak. Their strength lies in poison, and not in physical superiority. Secondly, Hank knew that he was stronger. He didn't understand where this confidence came from, but he really felt different after waking up. He became stronger. And lastly, he was overcome with excitement. It all started out of curiosity. The dark toad's poison is quite potent, so he should definitely have died immediately. But instead of death, the damage to his body suddenly began to heal on its own. And then Hank realized he wasn't imagining it. Their poison had no effect on him. Hank proudly shouted to the monsters that their poison was useless. That was enough. There were still quite a few monsters left, but if he continued to crush them one by one, victory would be his. But fate is a funny thing, and at that moment of confidence, a huge monster snuck up on Hank. Confidence and excitement were able to weaken Hank's vigilance, and the monster attacked our hero. Hank crashed into the wall and seemed to lose consciousness briefly, but his sister's screams woke him up. He opened his eyes and tried to comprehend what was happening, and remembered about the monster. A huge creature in the eyes with everything ablaze. Hank was lucky that he didn't die immediately. But suddenly fear filled him, because in front of this terrible monster stood his beloved sister. Then his strength returned. He stood up and shouted, "He will come now." But suddenly Sunny shouted for him not to come here. Sunny was trembling and in the same trembling voice said, "There is no need to save her. Let her run away." Hank screamed what she was saying. Hank tried to get the monster's attention, but it was too late. The monster had already swung its paw, and the sister apologized to her brother. Those were her last words before the monster tore her apart. Someone like Sunny. She who cared so selflessly for her brother should not die like this. Hank began to scream in grief. He continued to scream. Why did she fight for him? Why? He would have died soon anyway. Hatred engulfed his body. He suddenly felt a raging force inside him. A huge purple snake crawled out of his body. Hank had no idea what it was, but it didn't matter now. The important thing is that this huge snake is capable of killing the vile toad. But Hank only wished for the toad to die, and the snake instantly pierced him. Not far from the battle site, an unfamiliar girl was sitting on the roof and saw everything. She was impressed that Hank was able to summon the Scarlet Viper. Now Hank was very interesting to her. But he'd better hold back his strength. They'll start a real hunt for him if they find out. The girl was wondering whether she should help him, because the little devil was barely coping, as she herself said. The monsters kept coming and Hank couldn't let his sister die because of someone like him. She risked everything. Her sacrifice will not be in vain. Hank said that he will definitely come back for her. My breathing is getting weaker. I can't hesitate, and I can't escape because of the monsters around me. There was no choice. He would have to fight if she survived. Then it didn't matter what happened to him, Hank thought. Hank wanted to take down all these monsters, but it seemed like his strength was starting to leave Hank. He fell to the ground, probably a side effect of the snake he summoned. Hank was coughing up blood. Hank was irritated that this was happening now. He was angry with himself and asked to get up. He begged himself to get up, begged himself to fight, but he was too weak. The monster attacked him. However, he did not feel any pain. Then Hank opened his eyes and saw that woman. She stopped the monster with one hand. The woman said, "The imp had overdone it. Why waste such a powerful ability on small fry? The release of such a quantity of black ether is fraught with consequences." She gave her name. Her name is Carrie. "I'd like to chat some more, but first we need to clear the way," Carrie said, then grabbed Hank. Then she threw Hank back and yelled at him to lie down with his little sister. Hank was shocked that the woman had easily thrown him with just one hand, while Carrie continued to fight. The monster couldn't keep up with Carrie. She was too fast. The monster couldn't even scratch her. And Carrie seemed to be having fun. She shouted that the monster was a complete weakling and happily beat him. The monster was torn apart by one blow from her. She is a high-class hunter, that's for sure. Hank was envious. He wanted the same thing. He wanted at least half of her strength to protect the person dear to him. Carrie suddenly appeared behind Hank and asked why her friend was so sad, that something was wrong. Hank didn't know what to tell her. Then Carrie said not to worry. She would survive. This calmed Hank down a little. Carrie said that his sister was lucky. Not everyone is so lucky. If she didn't know how to heal, she would have died here. She will survive. These words were not a joke. There weren't even any scars left on his sister. Hank couldn't even imagine that combat hunters capable of healing existed. It was incredible. This woman saved his family. Hank could no longer hold back his tears. Hank thanked Carrie for saving his sister. Carrie asked why he was crying. "He acts like he has one foot in the grave. Why is he making such a face?" "Maybe we should stop being dramatic," Carrie asked. But Hank didn't understand. He asked what she meant by that. Carrie said that she was making him repeat himself. Not to worry, he would survive. Having said this, Carrie decided to return to fighting monsters, but Hank called her. Carrie asked what. Then Hank asked if it was true that he would survive. Could he become as strong as her? Hank was barely breathing, but he continued talking. He was fed up with life passing him by. Carrie smiled proudly, then told her student to watch closely. She will show Hank the one and only technique named after her, Poison Rain. Carrie created a huge ball and threw the ball into the sky. Clouds formed and it began to rain. And then she said, "This is the level that the imp should strive for," Hank thought. The hunters are strong. It would seem that this is a well-known truth, but Hank has never seen such overwhelming force. For someone to simply wave their hand and cause rain to fall, riddling all the monsters around. Having gotten rid of all the monsters at once, Carrie asked. He asked if he could do the same, and she guarantees it. He will become the greatest hunter in the world. She gave Hank hope. A little later, Carrie has now become Hank's teacher, but he seems somehow uncomfortable. But Carrie didn't like formality, so she told Hank he could switch to informal form. Then Hank asked, a little awkwardly, if it definitely wouldn't kill him. Carrie acted as if nothing had happened, even though she was holding Hank's leg. Seeing the cute stickers on Hank's room door, Carrie started laughing nonstop. Hank became embarrassed and said he really thought he was going to die. Carrie couldn't stop laughing. She said through her laughter, she said she wouldn't kill him. She just wanted to stuff him with this. "This is black ether." Carrie held out the ball and Hank froze in surprise. Carrie asked if he didn't know what it was. "I haven't even heard about this, but I've heard something about the Yaddlers." Hank has heard about the Yaddlers. This is because the Yaddlers are quite famous. This class of hunters was considered the top one in their time. After one incident, they disappeared from sight for a long time, and it seems that people now despise them. Enemies of humanity, traitors. Hank listed it all, and Carrie looked at him calmly. Then she also calmly said that, alas, she was one of those villains, and Hank became nervous. Carrie said there was no need to worry about it. It wasn't that he was wrong, it didn't really shock him. Isn't it scary at all, Hank replied. She did save him and his sister after all. At first he thought she was crazy. I mean, compared to others, Hank started to get nervous again. Carrie laughed and said, she was even pleased. The Yadlers really are abnormal. It would be better to say, special. Their eccentricity becomes apparent when they fully awaken, and Hank only becomes more confused. Carrie then explained that ordinary hunters rarely die when they awaken, with the mortality rate being less than 1%. Very low, while the Yadlers are dying like flies while they are waking up. It is strange that Carrie talks about it so happily. The reason for the death of the Yadler is very simple. Poison is constantly being synthesized inside each Yadler, and they get worse day by day, and when the concentration of the poison reaches a certain point, an explosion occurs. Hank got nervous because that's exactly what was happening to him. Carrie just laughed. All the pain Hank went through was just a symptom of awakening. Hank is now a Yadler. Carrie was overly excited about the new student, kicking open the door and dragging Hank along with her. They came to the roof of a tall building. Carrie reminded that inside each poisoner, a poison is synthesized. It turns out that for the Yadlers, their poison is both salvation and danger. Suddenly, Carrie took out a syringe. Without further ado, Carrie threw the syringe at Hank, the healing power of the Yadlers surpassing all bounds of reason. No matter what he does, the healing power is always active, and there is no way to get rid of the poison. Their bodies have adapted. Every second they neutralize the poison, turning it into black ether. Carrie happily said that it was a gift for her student. It was an injection of her own black ether. It was time to start training. Carrie seemed to be a very cheerful woman, but an awkward Hank asked if he could ask a question. Hank asked in all seriousness, didn't she say that poison rain was their one and only skill? There was an awkward silence as Hank stared at Carrie, who then ran away from answering. She jumped onto another building with lightning speed, which even impressed our hero. He even forgot about his question, only thinking about how cool Carrie was, how she was moving like a tank. An hour had already passed, and Carrie continued to jump from building to building, and Hank continued to wait for her. Hank asked dejectedly if he could do the same without any physical training. Carrie finally returned to Hank and asked why the student was so sad. Maybe he should try first, and then he'll worry. And suddenly it turns out to be as easy as pie. It looks like Carrie had no brakes. Hank became sad and said that it was easy for her to say that. She was just so strong, so she couldn't understand him. Moron, freak, degenerate, fatherless, and all that. Everyone said this to our hero. He heard it all his life. He knows it sounds like an excuse, but our hero is simply scared. Carrie's smile disappeared. She said she was wrong. This teaching style really doesn't suit him. She should have taken this into account. From now on, everything would be tough. Carrie said it a little too sweetly. Before our Hank could process this, Carrie grabbed him by the shirt and said, the most important thing is his emotions. You need to concentrate on the very tips of your toes, and then direct all your emotions there. Hank tried to appeal to her common sense, but Carrie ignored him. She let go of Hank while talking about how beautiful the blue sky was today. Carrie just went and threw Hank off the roof, then wished him luck. And if nothing works out, it looks like Carrie is really crazy. She still managed to give him advice while Hank was falling. Hank had no choice. He would be smashed to the ground if he didn't do something. You have to at least try. Try to concentrate on the very tips of your fingers. Just as Hank tried to concentrate, the voices of people sounded in his head again. But this time, Hank was angry. He felt as if he was choosing what he would be born as. Then Carrie's voice sounded in his head, and Hank got really angry and swung at it. It looks like Hank succeeded. Well, since he's alive, that means he succeeded. But now Hank is worried about something else. He didn't know how to land now. Suddenly Carrie flew past and praised her student. Carrie said Hank was too fixated on it being impossible, but it wasn't that hard really. She hugged Hank as if he were a lost kitten, and said it was so much easier when your life was on the line. Later, Carrie burned Hank with her cat eyes, and Hank asked her to take her hands off. It turned out that Carrie was examining his eyes, and Hank decided that she had completely lost her mind. He asked what she was doing, but Carrie wouldn't let go of Hank, and he got scared and started screaming. Suddenly a window appeared in front of Hank's eyes. He asked, "A portable device. Isn't that the advanced technology that hunters use?" Carrie answered, "Yes, but this device is different from the ones others use. Lenses are divided into types that have distinctive features." Hank admitted that it was a useful item, but he asked if it was really impossible to give him the lens in a normal way, since she was in a hurry somewhere. Carrie sighed and said, "He has a keen eye. It turns out she's being followed, and it will get hot if she's discovered." So she didn't have to linger. Hank was surprised that she was being followed. but Carrie solicitously stroked his head. Then she said, "Let him find Dr. Jin. He is a genius, the kind you have to look for, and he is also her friend. The device will help find him, so let her follow him. This is her last gift for him." Carrie handed over the sphere and was about to say goodbye to Hank. But Hank could not understand why such a kind person as she was being persecuted. He called Carrie and said that this was the first time someone else had taken care of him, and he was grateful. Hank asked to let him repay her one day. Now Hank is sure that she is the one to whom he owes his life. He spoke confidently. He didn't mind if he had to work hard. If it would help her, he would do anything, really. But Carrie unexpectedly replied, no, it was too early for him to think about helping her. He needed to gather his strength, to become so strong that he doesn't fall into despair when he sees enemies who are many times stronger than him, to become strong enough to protect everyone. Carrie asked Hank to promise her this. Hank confidently answered, "He promises." Carrie praised the baby, and before disappearing, she added, looking at his expression, she believed that he would succeed. Carrie was free as the wind. Those were Carrie's last words before she disappeared. And now our hero's life, which had nothing in it, had a purpose after that incident. Criticism of the guild gained momentum. A huge fire broke out on the internet. But after a few days, people started supporting the Glory Guild again. And after a couple of days, the critics had completely disappeared. And our hero was heading to the mountain. She wrote a note to his sister that he would be gone for a couple of days. Hank looked at the sphere and wondered why Carrie gave him this. It looked like the core of a monster. But Hank didn't know how to use it. Carrie told him to hold the sphere and remember. How he felt when he used the poison step, Hank decided to give it a try. The core immediately began to glow. It seemed to have entered Hank's body. The status of the black core changed. The user's current black ether level has increased significantly. It seems Hank needs to absorb ether to become stronger. Now he was curious about how strong he was now. The system reported that his body corresponded to the level of an E-rank hunter. If he continues to absorb black ether and manages to accumulate the required amount, he will be able to obtain a body that matches that of an SS-rank hunter. Hank was shocked, to put it mildly. Could he really seriously become the strongest hunter in the world? It seems that Carrie was not lying to Hank. Suddenly, Hank heard the man screaming, "How did you get it?" Some man was yelling at a woman with a child. He was shouting that there was no way through here, but the mother was not going to back down. She screamed, "Her child is sick. They set up a checkpoint without warning. They weren't even from the government." Then the boar rudely told her to shut her stinking mouth. He continued to insult the mother and child, repeating that they were poor and that superhumans were more important than her. The idiot wouldn't shut up and kept talking nonsense. The kid got scared and started crying. Then Hank stepped forward. He said they abandoned the place when they were needed and now want to save face. Hank pointed out their hypocrisy and how pathetic they were acting. And of course the boar didn't know what to say. He walked up to the man without fear and calmly continued to say that the man was probably from a company that worked for the Glory Guild. Everyone in Korea knows their patch. The boar got angry and asked how the degenerate dared to say that to him, despite the fact that he recognized the patch. But Hank wasn't worried at all. He seemed interested in learning about his abilities. Of course, this is the first time he's been in a fight. He specifically asked if the boar would hit him, although it would be a lie to say that Hank wasn't scared, because the man swung at him with all his might. The boar couldn't control himself at all after hitting the civilian. He shouted, "This will be a lesson in etiquette." But he didn't expect that Hank would calmly grab his stick and easily break it. Our hero was no longer going to hide. In fact, Hank had never learned to fight. But he stated that after this blow, everything he did would be considered self-defense. His stance was unstable, his breathing was ragged, and the punch he delivered was nothing more than a beginner's punch. But now everything was different. Hank's body was special, so that was enough to punish the boar. It seems that Hank himself did not expect that his blow was so strong the man fell onto the asphalt. And he started calling for help. A pathetic sight. An immature man. Hank told him to stop whining. He reminded the boar that people had screamed when the gate appeared here. They had been waiting. Since they believed that the guild would come to their aid, Hank quickly realized that talking to him was useless. It was just a waste of time, so Hank turned around and went on to look for the doctor. Hank reached the phone booth, a payphone in a deserted place. At least it was suspicious. But the system told him he was in the right place, so Hank decided to call. Hank pressed the button. Suddenly the phone started beeping loudly. Hank didn't understand what he did wrong, but he didn't have to think about it for long, a second. Later the floor disappeared, and Hank fell into the ground. He fell to the floor and started complaining that this could kill you. Hank hoped that he didn't get caught in the saw 10. After looking around, he asked if he really deserved such a special reception. Hank decided that this Dr. Jin was definitely crazy. Hank wanted to shake off the dust, but saw that his hand was covered in blood. The scene was exactly like a saw. It seems Hank miscalculated the location. Suddenly a siren blared and an invasion was announced. An order was given over the loudspeaker to eliminate the intruder. And at that very moment the room was filled with poisonous gas. Hank was completely confused. He thought that Dr. Jean was a close friend of Carrie. Maybe he betrayed her. Or maybe someone attacked him. Hank inhaled the poison and panicked. But then he remembered. He has immunity. He can breathe as much as he wants, and the poison is not dangerous anyway. Suddenly footsteps were heard and Hank became nervous. A man began to approach the room. Hank wondered if it was an enemy or an ally and decided to hide. But the man said that just a little more and he would die. And while he was scolding the people from the association, Hank plucked up his courage and attacked the man. After all, the best defense is a good attack. He rushed at the man and was already getting ready to hit him. But he quickly noticed that the man was already unconscious. Something our hero did not expect. Later, when the man had already woken up, Hank told him about his meeting with Carrie and that she advised him to go to him. Then the man said that he understood everything and asked to be released, otherwise he was having difficulty breathing. But Hank was afraid that the man would do something again, so he was in no hurry. The man declared that he was not some kind of bandit, but the great Dr. Jean. Then Hank asked why he needed such traps. If it weren't for his immunity, he would have kicked the bucket long ago. Hank warned the doctor that he wasn't joking. The doctor explained that there was no way for ordinary people to get in here. The only people who came here were Carrie and the other hunters. He is a truly talented scientist, and naturally, many people need his help. In the past, he had a pretty hard time because of crowds of annoying cretins. Those were difficult, unstable, but very interesting times. Only one problem was bothering him. The number of people pursuing him was growing. Assassins from other countries, dubious organizations, even hunters from the association targeted his life. There were not many reasons for this, his money or technical skills. But even under the pressure of constant attacks, he survived. However, over time, Jin realized that everyone around him was focused on his life. From then on, he limited all contact with people and began to develop paranoia. And also, he started living in secluded places, like this. But they keep coming. There is no place in this room that is not stained with blood. Hank, after listening to Jean, said that even though he was freeing him, he shouldn't even think about pulling any tricks. And why did he tell his autobiography? Hank asked. Jean answered. Because Carrie sent him. He trusts her almost as much as he trusts himself. After Jin was wounded, he hid in an alley. Then Carrie came up to him and asked what the man was doing in such a place. He was also abandoned, remembering his first meeting with Carrie. Jean realized that she and Hank were similar. It turns out that Carrie had the same spots as Hank. Jean thought he was the same as Carrie was. Jin said, "Who would have thought that a student would be so similar to his teacher?" Hank didn't understand what Jean was talking about, because he thought that he was the only one with this disease. He thought Jean was talking about him and Carrie being Yadlers, but Jean said that Carrie had the same spots. But Hank didn't believe him, because Carrie looked stunning, so the genie decided to show Hank a photo. He asked Hank to follow him so that he could explain to him what and how things were going here. Jean asked Hank what he thought about the poison being inside his body. Hank replied that he hadn't thought about it. Then Jin revealed that one drop of his poison could kill an A-rank hunter. Hank clearly didn't expect that a drop of his blood would be so dangerous. Of course, he knew that he had become stronger. But so much so, ranks don't even count for people. That's how strong they are. And Jin claims that one drop of Hank is capable of killing such people. But Jean quickly cut his joy short when he reminded him that Hank was still a ticking time bomb. Hank asked what he should do. Jean replied that Hank needed to train. His marks are symptoms that show that Hank is unable to control his own venom. They will pass once he starts to control himself. Jean personally trained Carrie. Jean promised to change Hank beyond recognition by the time Hank completed his training. And then Jean started to push Hank. He told him to run, not to relax his stance. He gave him weights. Hank was at the limit of his strength, but Jean continued to drive Hank to the fullest. He did not allow him to relax. 7 days after arriving at the laboratory, much had changed, and the spots had begun to disappear. The first change was that he took off his annoying gas mask. Maybe he started to trust Hank. But when Jin was young and could easily pass for a handsome man, I wonder what happened to him. The second change is that Hank's sister woke up and said that she panicked when she woke up and didn't find him there. She was obviously screaming at the top of her lungs, but Hank had used all his acting skills to make her believe him. The third change is a new device. Dr. Jin began to examine his body, and suddenly he produced a new device. It was an advanced version of the one that Carrie had given him. The time that Jean spent developing it, Jean made it in 3 days. And the biggest changes have happened to his body. Changes that have happened in his body since he started training. They were amazing. Hank removed his bangs and his handsome face appeared. Suddenly Jean clapped. And he said he knew Hank was a hottie, but how can I put it? Hank became like a sex symbol. Then Jean went completely crazy and started shouting about how handsome Hank was, and that he was jealous. Hank didn't understand why Jean was angry, because he thought he wasn't that handsome. Later, Jean was eating and Hank was sitting on the exercise machine. Hank asked if the doctor was bored. He has been alone for so long, how does he manage not to get bored in such an environment, and not get tired of canned food? Jean said that he was not actually alone, it was on his shoulder. Hank didn't understand anything. He looked over his shoulder and saw a dragon, and his reaction was appropriate. Hank started shouting what it was, and Jean, like a fanatic, started saying that these were some of those monsters that the Yadlers had tamed many years ago. The most amazing thing about him is that he is able to absorb the poison of his host, and he also latched onto Hank 2 days ago. But Hank didn't notice anything. Hank himself was in shock that he hadn't noticed the little dragon for 2 days. Hank's sensitivity increased several times, but he didn't even notice it, and the little dragon can even disappear. And that's not all. This is the rarest ability. It is considered rare even among the strongest Esper hunters. While Hank was wondering where the baby dragon got this ability from, the doctor called him. Hank wanted to jump out of the workout, but Jean quickly noticed and told him to get up while his legs were still intact. Some man asked the guy if maybe it was time to make him forget about him. Why should he waste his precious nerves on all this crap? The man squeezed the guy's shoulder. The guy trembled like a leaf, answered in a frightened voice. He understood everything. The man put on a hypocritical smile, and he suggested that she continue to work well. But then he remembered everything and asked if he knew where Maria was. The guy trembled even more, and the man frowned and asked if she had locked herself in the healing room again. The girl stood in front of the altar and trembled. She apologized. The girl was wounded. The Glory Guild had a secret. The person representing the guild was constantly locked in a special room for endless self-flagellation. Feeling guilty about not being able to protect, the man approached and asked how long this would continue. She goes beyond all boundaries of self-flagellation. For someone else, this would have ended very badly. But her self-healing abilities instantly restored her exhausted body. And all because she is the best healer in the world, Maria. The girl trembled and said, "Many innocent people died. More than 500 people died. How can the leaders say that they did everything they could? They have no right to say that. Why did they sacrifice them?" The head is clearly tired of her self-flagellation. The man continued talking, but Maria could not calm down. She cried and screamed that they could have saved more people. Then the chief said that the monsters that appeared this time were not like usual. He shed a theatrical tear and said it was because he wasn't good enough. The leader began to play on her pity and made himself out to be a victim. Maria, a naive soul, immediately fell for it. And the leader continued to play his role, shouting about the poor people and how he had let them all down. Of course, it was all just a pretense in reality. He didn't care about people at all. He felt like throwing up because he had to do such things, and naive Maria started crying. The chief smiled again and asked if Maria would like to visit the Hunter Examination Center. They need to recruit new talents to save more people. The devil really does wear a suit, smile, and have perfect looks. While he pretended to calm Maria down, he thought that the monsters really were strong this time. So who the hell could have dealt with them so quickly? That crater is especially scary. And the man who dealt with the monsters was now training in a closed laboratory. The head of the Glory Guild was irritated that he didn't know a person with such power. Jin asked what path he would choose. Maybe a knight. Hank replied that he was thinking about something else. The leader was choosing guys for the guild. The only thing missing was a healer. And Hank chose to become a healer himself. He wanted to do what Carrie did for his sister. The chief said that healers are a rarity, and it doesn't matter if some poor people die. Hank spoke enthusiastically. Now he was sure of one thing. He would become a hunter, and he should visit the Hunter Examination Center. The guild leader said the same thing. A little later, Jean and Hank said goodbye to each other. Jean had managed to become attached to him. Hank promised that he would visit him and asked Jean to eat well, because canned food would lead to no good. Jin laughed and agreed, then said that Pori could go with Hank. Then Jin said goodbye to Pori and asked the little dragon to take care of Hank. Hank returned home. As soon as he opened the door, his sister grabbed him and started scolding him for daring to leave, leaving behind a pathetic piece of paper. Hank tried to say that he would explain everything. His sister turned out to be very strong, since she was able to hold Hank like that and almost strangle him. After many hours of explanations, Hank avoided his sister's gaze and added, "That's how it was." Sunny asked if he was sure about the man who saved him. Hank asked in what sense. She was more suspicious than Hank. She doubted even that Carrie had told him her real name. Sunny was worried. She thought that such a strong person had no reason to save them. But Hank insisted that Carrie wasn't that bad, so Sunny said in a serious tone, "It doesn't happen that someone does something good for nothing if he gets something. Then one day the time will come to give something in return, and she is afraid that the price she demands will be too high." Sunny continued to raise her brother like a little child, and he nodded vigorously. But of course, she was right. She sighed and asked if he really wanted to become a hunter. Hank nodded a little hesitantly. But the sister, unexpectedly, easily supported her brother. Hank asked in surprise why her. Sunny stated that whatever Hank does, it is his choice, and she has no reason to stop him. Hank's sister was really cool. Hank nodded. She always was. He said he thought a lot about everything. He came to the conclusion that everything that happened to them could have been prevented. He wants to save people. He doesn't want history to repeat itself. He wants to try. Although he doesn't know if it will work out, his sister smiled brightly at him and said that Hank will become a hunter greater than anyone else. Sunny worries about him more than anyone else, but at the same time, she also believes in him more than anyone else. Ironically, the second person to predict this for him, Hank smiled and said he would do everything in his power. A little later, Hank learned that the entrance fee for the exam was 50 million won. It was time to go and earn money. He, like a grown-up boy, decided to earn money himself. Hank has come to the Poison Dungeon, a place where his dungeon dreams will come true. And not only the dungeon itself is poisonous, but also everything inside these are the least popular types of dungeons. Usually people and hunters prefer to avoid them. Everything around is fenced off, and access is very limited. The problem is that the larger the restrictive zone, the more problems there are. Hank gathered his courage and went into the dungeon. It was a whole parallel world, like some kind of game. Our hero felt the air around him was filled with poison, as one would expect from a poisonous dungeon. Other hunters wouldn't even be able to breathe here, but that's not the case for our hero. There wasn't much time before the exam. Hank hoped that he would quickly be able to find what he came for. Suddenly something moved and a huge monster appeared from the forest. It was time to panic. Hank hoped that the monster didn't notice him. The monster was weak. Hank could defeat it. Another level is D, but another level implies other types of attacking abilities. Something beyond the physical. In other words, this bastard's complexity comes from the strength of his venom. He's either equal to or weaker than Hank in level. Well, that's what Hank thinks. But Hank is still nervous. Hank's hands were shaking. He tried to calm down, continued to scold himself for not being able to pull himself together. Memories of the first battle appeared before his eyes. But then the dragon called out to Hank. The baby seemed to be worried about Hank. So Hank thanked Pori for his concern, and Pori was happy. Thanks to Pori, he came back to normal. The monsters must have found Hank by now. There are more and more of them. Hank rummaged in his pocket and happily pulled out that thing. He thought he could kill all the monsters with a square. Earlier, Hank asked Jean what it was. Jin replied, he thought that Hank needed a weapon. He needed to squeeze it in his hand and shout, "Move!" Little Hank was doubtful about the weapon, but still said the right word, and Jean explained. This device is shaped like a cube only when it is not active, but as soon as the code word is said, it will change. Its functionality is infinite. It reacts to Hank's ether, increasing its output and changes at the will of the owner. The original device of Dr. Jin, the genius of the century, will be no bigger than a dagger. In any case, Hank would not lose. The hunt would begin. Now Hank was confident in himself. Hank swung his dagger and the power was so great that Hank cut through trees and monsters as if it were a piece of paper. Pieces of monsters fell to the ground. Hank was covered in the blood of these monsters. He was worried that his sister would be angry with him because his clothes got dirty. Then Hank went to collect poisons. The user's black ether level was increased. A satisfied Hank ate his fill of poison. For the kid it was like a buffet, and he went on eating. He found another monster corpse and ran towards it happily. This dungeon was just made for him. Counting this monster, it's only 50, so Hank will definitely score around 300 points today. But the more Hank looks at it, the less he understands. One hit, one kill. Hank understands that the amount of ether changes are closely related to the user's power level. But even so, it's too powerful. Hank only made a small cut. But the monster still died, without even having time to fight for its life. In the synergy of Hank's poison and the blade, one rule appeared. Whoever this blade strikes will die with one blow. The synergy between the device and the poisoner nailer is too strong. So, who knows? Maybe he is already one of the strongest. Hank was proud of his strength. Hank decided to open the status window. If the dungeons make him so strong, then he can't forget to monitor his progress. He was so excited when he opened the status window. Hank hoped that the status was close to B or even A class. But the physical level was still at E level. But the healing was at SS rank. Hank was a little upset. However, who cares about this physical level? He is still going to become a healer. Little Hank laughed a little, then calmed down and decided it was time for him to go home. After all this time and still not finding the plant he came for, Hank decided it was a waste of time. He hoped that he would have luck in the next dungeon. But suddenly he felt an eerie feeling of anxiety. There is someone in the forest. That creature is on a different level than the monsters he met earlier. A terrible monster came out of the forest. The name of the creature was a leper hyena. It was very poisonous. Even without looking, you can tell it's the dungeon boss. The target's combat skills are many times superior to Hank's. Hank visibly shook with fear, but he tried to pull himself together, because his poison was stronger than anything here. But the physical level is still a big problem. His physical level is 2 ranks lower. If we compare it, it's like a child going up against an adult. No, the difference in strength is even greater. Hank was wondering if he had a chance. Pori was also shaking with fear, so Hank asked him to hide for a while. He needed to focus quickly. Hank believed that if he kept an eye on him, everything would be fine. But the monster turned out to be incredibly fast. The monster instantly appeared behind Hank. He couldn't defend himself. The monster attacked Hank before Hank could blink. Of course, it was very painful. Hank felt real fear. He didn't even see the monster's movements. Hank wondered if he was going to die here. But this thought angered Hank himself, and he began to scold himself. Why on earth should he die here? Hank also called himself a mongrel, funny guy. He lived in torment for so many years, so why the hell should he die in a place like this? Having calmed down, Hank noticed that for some reason the creature had frozen. Perhaps it was waiting for its poison to take effect. Well, that's her biggest mistake. Now Hank has a chance to win. The audacity of a monster. It will become what will destroy him. Hank confidently called the monster and told it to attack. First you have to exhaust the monster, and then you have to trust your high status as a healing power. Hank let the monster bite him again. Healing and poison, 2 opposites. How do they get along in the body of a Yaddler? Usually, for a Yaddler, healing is just a method of survival, a cleansing poison in the body. But the most interesting thing is where the resignations of the healing power go then. The healing simply circulates mindlessly throughout its host's body, and Professor Jin knows this. More than anyone else, Hank just needs to get these chaotic currents in his body together, to concentrate the poison and healing into a single whole. The limit that Hank's body will reach transforms into Professor Jin's 3rd original device, the circulator. Now Hank was more confident. He could start the 2nd round. The monster would have to try hard to kill little Hank. The monster also quickly attacked Hank, and it was Hank who was injured. The monster was still full of strength. The fight seems to be dragging on. Healing is helping Hank heal his wounds, but his strength is quickly fading. And the monsters apparently got bored. It was as if he was mocking Hank, showing how bored he was. The monster was holding up much better than Hank had imagined. And now Hank was worried that he had underestimated it. And now the monster was attacking Hank again. More than an hour had already passed, and this freak wasn't even tired. The freak also hits accurately, and Hank didn't even land a single real blow on him. His wounds are only increasing, and it seems that by simply wearing this creature down, Hank will not achieve victory anytime soon. But everything is not as bad as it seems. Hank is already beginning to get used to his movements. The fight was certainly unequal, but not impossible. Although there was a reason why this dog was so impudent. It was that she understood on an instinctive level how important strength of spirit is in battle. Hank is tired, but he has no right to show it. As soon as he shows it, he will die. The monster attacked Hank and he flew into the forest, leaving behind a huge trail. Hank crashed into a tree and said in annoyance, the monster sent him flying. Hank was probably angry at himself. The saddest truth is that in this situation, Hank is clearly losing. But the dog doesn't even try hard enough. You can understand our hero. He's dying there, and the dog sits there as if nothing happened. Irritation got the better of him, and Hank ran towards the monster to attack, and asked along the way, how dare he relax, the flea-bitten cretin. Hank has already gotten personal. It's a pity that the monsters were faster than Hank and ran away before Hank hit. Hank remembered Carrie saying that no matter how strong the enemy was, you can't give in to despair. Carrie is strong, even if she has enemies who drive her into the abyss of despair. Then this is someone much stronger than the one in front of him now, so he has no right to lose. Hank healed himself again. He remembered that he swore that he would not lose. He had to hold on. Hold on until the enemy is exhausted. This time Hank was firm in his decision. He understood that miracles don't come easy, you have to try, and try with all your might. Earlier, Jean was very surprised when he learned that Hank could summon a scarlet viper. He asked not to call her again. It was a miracle that Hank was able to survive that time. This power was far beyond their understanding. A notification came in. The system said that if Hank continues to fight with an opponent who is several times stronger than him, preparations for what the ether would be thrown out. But Hank continued to think that he would endure. He knew he still had a lot to learn. The system told him that Hank would have to face the consequences. Suddenly, Hank's physical level increases sharply. A miracle really happened, Hank said proudly. He thought he was going to die, but it was time to show off Mad Dog. Hank's speed has increased significantly. Not only speed, but strength and reflexes have also increased. Everything has increased exponentially, but he may be tired, but he is still level C, like a different league. Just once. This attack is his last chance if he uses more black ether. It will be difficult for him to cope even with his own poison. He needs to put all his strength into the next attack. And what's the point of keeping the ether throughout the body if Hank changes his concentration? If you focus on attack and turn off your defense, one hit will be enough. But if he just goes head-on, he wouldn't be able to control the speed and would hurt himself. So Hank decided to prepare his stance in advance. It doesn't matter if Hank can't control it, he'll hold that stance. And to tear it apart, without a single unnecessary movement, all he needs is to skin this scum with one precise blow. At least it wasn't in vain that he exhausted the dog, the monster, and Hank instantly came closer to each other. And here's another miracle. Hank cut the dog's head with his dagger. Hank was able to win. But there is a problem. His clothes are completely destroyed. No big deal. He looks pretty good anyway. Hank hoped that the monsters in the next dungeon would not be so difficult. Well, our hero came to the dungeon again. Hank was wondering how often we play sports. After all, a half-hour jog is enough for a person to slow down aging and avoid unnecessary stress. It's amazing, isn't it? Hank works out often, which gives him energy for the whole day. Let's ignore the fact that Hank is being chased by a skyscraper-sized spider. That's another story. Hank was wrong in thinking that his suffering was over because of that victory over the dog. Although it was a great victory, there was one but. Our hero was quite humiliated. People, of course, stared and pointed at him, and he felt terribly awkward. Suddenly someone called Hank. It was the woman with the child. She recognized Hank. She reminded Hank that they had run into each other at the checkpoint, and she again thanked Hank for his help. But Hank was too embarrassed, so he said that she must have made a mistake. He should go die somewhere in the bushes from shame. And after the humiliation on the street, at home, Hank was faced with torture from his dear sister, who scolded him for exhibitionism. It was a terrible day. If it weren't for all this, he wouldn't be crying like a child now. And this ugly thing, not only does it look disgusting, but also because of its enormous size. Every inch of her disgusting body was under a microscope, as if Hank could finish her off. They would have given him a medal for saving the minds of billions. But Hank slipped through a small hole and was saved. Hank turned around and saw an incredible flower. It was glowing. Hank found a mystical flower. The flower he was so desperate to find, this bronze sunflower, has a special feature. Change its color depending on the difficulty of the dungeon. It is called gold. The silver and bronze flowers of the sun, respectively. Hank found a flower of no quality, bronze. If you think it's worthless because it's of such low quality, then you don't know anything about growing weed. This flower is worth no less than 10 million, and its price, if it were of the highest quality, would reach 50 million won. A crazy amount for some flower, but all the good stuff is inside. As always, it's like that flower from Rapunzel. The healing properties of the flower are comparable to the abilities of a CC rank healer. Even a bronze flower has tremendous healing power. These flowers only grow in poisonous dungeons, and that's one of the biggest pains in the ass. Hank decided to run away from the monster, but the spider still found him. Hank can of course kill it with his dagger. And its size doesn't really fit into this cave. Everything is much simpler than with a hyena. But once the dungeon boss dies, the bronze flower of the sun will wither along with him. It turns out that he needs to take control of the boss, and only then take the flower. But Hank isn't his sister. He can't go after the monster with his bare hands. He seems to be at a dead end. Suddenly the system reported that there was an idea. Hank did not expect this. The system used white sleep. This is not a deadly dagger mode, but a second mode that allows you to take control of the enemy, put them to sleep, or paralyze them. Hank didn't know the dagger could do that. It was Dr. Jin's custom mode for those whose skills were attack-based. It's amazing what kind of monster Jin created, but if it weren't for Jin, Hank wouldn't have had a chance to win. Hank was unhappy that he only found out about this now. He asked the system why he was finding out about this now. The system asked boldly, well, Hank didn't ask. What does it have to do with it? This upset Hank even more. Then Hank told himself to calm down. Now was not the time to lose his temper over some bullshit. The system indicated that Hank's breathing had quickened, and his blood pressure was acting up. Hank asked the system to shut up. Hank called the spider, and for some reason decided to introduce himself. It was strange that the spider listened to him. And while the spider was distracted, Hank delivered his blow. One blow was enough to put the spider to sleep. Hank admitted that it was a good ability. Since the boss was now sleeping, he could go get the flower. The spider really fell into a deep sleep. Finally, the flower will be with Hank. Now he is rich. Suddenly, Pori crawled out of the jacket, apparently expecting him to eat the flower. But Hank told him to crawl back in. It's not food, Pori made a face. But it didn't work. Hank said it wouldn't work. In the future, when he grows up to be a good boy, he will give him something better. Hank was interested in how Jean and Carrie were doing. They were so insistent that Hank find this flower. They said the same thing. The most important thing in this is money. Jean shouted that Hank had to find the bronze sunflower, even if it meant risking his life. Carrie said that any component related to healing is associated with poison. Let him remember once and for all, this is their motto, opposites always attract. But Hank didn't get the hang of it, he asked. What's in it for him? The teacher is a real pro at passing off all sorts of nonsense as something cool. Then Carrie gave him a flick on the head and told him that he would understand everything later and that he should not contradict her again. But Hank still doesn't understand why she hit him then. Hank could only complain to Pori. But selling a flower is a real hassle, so why can't you sell it to some store? Hank was too lazy to deal with it. An underground economic center, that is, a black market. Hank felt the cold stares and asked Pori to boldly bite anyone he considered suspicious. He finally reached the black market and was quite disappointed. He thought that this place was a huge dump. It's amazing how suspicious characters from all over the world have gathered here. At first it seems like absolutely everyone is out to beat you up. Well, that's obvious. A beefy knight of the E rank and a skinny knight of the D rank, who will win? If they were ordinary people, someone with tremendous physical strength would clearly have an advantage. But what if we are talking about hunters? The tiny D-level knight is an unrivaled killer. The question is different. Why is the big guy naked? While the outcome of a battle also depends on their skills and experience, it is no secret that higher-ranking hunters are much stronger. In the world of hunters, there is nothing more important than rank, and when you don't have a reconnaissance device, then you always risk finding yourself in a similar situation, judging your opponent by his appearance. Simply put, the black market is a lawless place, and there's nothing to do without a gun. But there's definitely something wrong with that D-rank guy. Hank found reconnaissance-type devices. The functionality is much worse than the first model. It can't even determine the hunter's level. The price scared Hank too much. This thing cost 20 million. Hank put the thing back with trembling hands. Hank thought it was a pile of metal and didn't understand why it was so expensive. But as soon as Hank put the thing back, a guy came running. While Hank was wondering how many boxes of ramen he could buy for that price, the boy was delighted with his find. He saw the price. Hank decided that the guy would also be scared. But the guy unexpectedly said, "It's practically free." The wonders of the black market. But Hank has no time for that now. He needs to find a place where they sell flowers of the sun. But Hank didn't see anyone selling a flower here. Suddenly Hank heard Pori squeak. He turned around and saw Pori biting and hitting some stranger. Then Hank ran up to them. It seems that Hank forgot that he himself asked Pori to bite suspicious people. Hank wanted to heal the girl. But then the girl stood up and grabbed Hank's bag and ran away. The naive boy just stared at her. And it looks like all the weirdos of Korea have gathered here. She used a hidden technique. So the bag is gone too. Hank noticed this only now. What a disappointment. Time to get out of here. The girl ran into the alley and said happily. She finally broke away. She thought he was strong. While she was laughing at Hank for bringing a bronze sunflower here in a regular bag, she bumped into our little one, and the little one was very unhappy. He asked who she called weakling. The girl got nervous and asked how. Hank asked what difference it made. Did it matter now? He praised Pori and told the girl to return the package to him. If she gave it to him now, she would leave in one piece. The girl said she might not repeat it. She doesn't think she can stand up to him in a fight. Hank was pleased that the girl gave in surprisingly quickly. He extended his hand. But the girl suddenly walked away and asked if she didn't want to make a deal with her. Hank asked why. The girl replied that she was born and raised in this place, and that she knew every nook and cranny of the black market. There are places here that ordinary people have never heard of. Hank asked incredulously what she wanted in return. The girl replied that she would advise him on a great place to sell, and that the cost would be divided by 6 and 4. He is 6, she is 4. Hank was angry, thinking that she was trying to deceive him. She doesn't seem like a bad person, so he wouldn't want to fight her. But still, Hank decided to intimidate her. Hank released his creepy aura and asked if she was trying to fool him. He was about to spare her, but he thought it would be better to finish her off. The girl became noticeably nervous. Then she gathered her strength and shouted, without threatening, that she thought he would have managed to find her if she had really wanted to hide from him. Hank asked if the place where his familiar bit her itched, didn't it? Of course it itches, but Pori's poison is not capable of more than that. But she doesn't know that. And Hank began to skillfully lie that his familiar's poison was capable of killing even an SS rank knight. Even Pori decided to play along with Hank, and made a face that in the black market, the one who is left looking like a fool, loses. And in such battles, the most important thing is to look strong, even if you are not a real Scarlet Viper. But this is enough to make the enemy believe his words. Our fool made the girl burst into tears. Fear overwhelmed her. Her thoughts became confused. The enemy began to connect the pieces of information together, thereby further convincing himself of what Hank needed. Hank spoke like a bully from Disney movies. She won't be able to run away. He will get her everywhere. This is the strategy of the winners. The girl burst into tears and asked the madman to spare her. Hank agreed and finished his tricks. Maybe he went too far, Hank thought. However, her stealth skills would be difficult to deal with, even though Hank pretends to be calm. But in fact, he somehow found her. If she had made more efforts to escape from him, he would have been powerless. Hank introduced himself and asked her name. The girl answered, Becca. Hank is glad that everything turned out this way. Then Hank asked, since they were now friends, maybe he would do him a favor and let him accompany him. They came to some man who was eating something incomprehensible. He said he was curious who his kitten had brought with her. Surprisingly, he turned out to be an extremely interesting young man, and Becca introduced him to the leader. The man introduced himself. His name was Chuck, the most powerful man on the black market. He's the sworn father of the black market. Hank decided to play tough guy and asked, so Chuck runs the place. The creepy man said, you could say that. Then Hank asked, how strange doesn't Chuck think? He came here only to make a deal, but unexpectedly such a high-ranking person appeared before him. And this is for some kind of deal. Hank was very suspicious, Chuck said. His precious daughter came to him. Shouldn't he, as her father, look into the situation? But Hank wasn't convinced. He said Chuck didn't seem too bothered to call her his precious daughter. But Chuck just said, enough of this chatter. On the black market, the one who gets screwed loses. This is bad. This is too much. Chuck burst out laughing and said, kid, it seems he can't hide his emotions at all. By the way, the meat he eats is clearly monster meat. So why does he eat such game? Hank said he thought Chuck was one of the monsters, but this was beyond his comprehension. Anyway, it's better to get this sorted out as soon as possible and get out of here, Hank asked. He has a bronze flower. That's interesting. Chuck laughed and said they had been running low on supplies lately. But Hank got a decent quality flower, and they had a deal. Chuck didn't think long. He's one of those people who knows a lot about products. But Hank was glad that they resolved everything quickly. But Chuck said a sharp but. Chuck said that Hank would have to kill this creature. Apparently Chuck decided that he scared Hank, but we have seen such a creature before. But what's interesting is where it came from. Chuck said that he himself wouldn't mind a peace deal. But these flowers are under the control of the association. However, it's a completely different matter if you got it yourself. If you got it yourself, it means you managed to defeat the boss. So, Hank is definitely capable of finishing off a regular hyena. There will be no deal if Hank loses to the hyena. He has no love for swindlers who can only talk. Let him decide. Whether he'll run away or risk his life to make a deal, it doesn't look like Hank has a gun on him. If he was going to give up, he'd better run away as soon as possible. But Hank wasn't afraid. So Hank easily killed the hyena in a second and asked how much Chuck would pay him for it. Conditions first. And this made Chuck laugh. He shouted how interesting. His daughter brought a very interesting person. Hank wasn't happy about this at all. He asked again how much Chuck was willing to pay, or was he deaf? Becca yelled at him to watch his language when he spoke to his father. But then Chuck called her. Then Becca froze in fear, and Chuck said in a creepy tone, did he give her his word? You need to know your place. The pressure was so great that even our boy was scared. But it wasn't just pressure. It was bloodlust. Cold sweat broke out on Hank, and Chuck apologized for being distracted. And he said he didn't want Hank to get hurt either. Hank called him a complete psycho. Just because his daughter interrupted their conversation, he exudes such a strong thirst for blood. Chuck's bloodlust was able to hurt Hank. How strong is he? Becca was unconscious. Hank decided to patch her up after everything. Hank asked again where they had stopped. It seemed they were discussing the amount. But he himself thought that this was the most crazy bastard. Chuck, whom he had met, finally offered to give him 60 million, and Hank instantly changed his mind about him. He, like a puppy, began to lick him from head to toe, thinking that Becca was a mean girl who was trying to steal from him. It seems our hero is ready to sell his soul and anything for money. He even asked Chuck if he could call him his father. Chuck laughed at this and said that Hank was very funny, since they closed the deal. Then Hank was going to leave, wasn't he? Hank replied that he had no further business there, but Becca shouted out where he was going. First he had to heal her. Only then did Hank remember about Becky and decided to heal her. Hank quickly healed Becky and she said it was a real miracle. All her wounds disappeared. Then Hank said he didn't poison her or anything, then apologized for lying. But this only made her angry, she screamed. It turns out she was crying only from fear and her own stupidity. Hank just laughed and ran away while Becky continued to yell at Hank and threaten him. But Hank was not bothered by her threats. He said goodbye to her and ran off into the sunset. The smiles suddenly disappeared when Hank left. Chuck asked if there was any trace of her wounds left. Becky answered yes. But she doesn't have to worry. The scar her father left behind is still with her. A big psycho tormented the girl. Chuck noticed the remains of the poison and said, it was also left over from that boy. Be patient. He understands why she was fooled. Sticky and disgusting to the touch, Even after the bloodlust had touched him, it left only a small scratch. Is he really that strong already? He was transported back to the past, when he was trembling with fear like a leaf. And he begged to kill him. A woman he knew asked why he was pestering her and asking her to kill him. Let him get up. He still has the strength to fight, doesn't he? Chuck continued to tremble, and Carrie asked if he wanted to get back on his feet and continue the fight, or if he wanted to be torn apart by pain after he survived. It seemed that Hank had met an old acquaintance of Carrie's, which was an unpleasant memory for Chuck. At home, Sunny decided to help her brother. She gave him advice so that he wouldn't mumble, because he was not a child. Sunny seemed very pleased with her work, and decided that Hank should look great in front of the judges. But even though Hank looked like a cool lawyer, he himself didn't really like this hairstyle. In the association, there were some very funny characters. Like these two. The Pod asked the gangster. There was a problem. The gangster replied, "This kid looks weak. Guys like that also get tested." Pod said that it was stupid to judge a hunter by his appearance now. The gangster asked if he was a patient, and although Hank could clearly hear these characters discussing him, he didn't say anything to them. But of course, he was angry with the guys, and like a boy he threatened them silently. Let's skip some insults. Hank remembered the Schnobel and the Egghead, and promised that he, as a great healer, would not help them. Even though Hank's marks have noticeably diminished, people still looked down on him. Hank began to doubt himself again and wondered if it was really that bad. He thought most of it had already healed. He thought they could have at least hidden a little disgust. Now he felt awkward. It's strange that Hank is considered ugly, because it's obvious that Hank is a handsome guy. Then some guy came up and asked if someone like him was registering as a healer. It will only damage their reputation. It seems that the girl's arrogant character did not upset the girls at all. Seeing the girls, the guy put on a mask and forced a smile, and asked them to pretend that they didn't see him. The girls fell for his stupid cuteness game, but honestly the guy is far from the most handsome. Meanwhile, our handsome man left the building. He was pleased that he finished faster than he expected. While he was thinking about what to eat on the way home, he heard someone shouting, "He is waiting for an explanation. The Guild of Glory." It was a peaceful protest, about the same incident in the city that Hank was in. The protests have become much less. Although it was a real disaster, it seems that the Blue Guild tried hard to divert attention from this incident. An association employee quickly ran over to stop the peaceful protest, while Hank watched and thought, if he had woken up earlier, this woman would not have had to protest now. The unfortunate woman cried and screamed, asking why her child had to die. While the employee could only think about the company's reputation, the woman asked to arrange a meeting with the president. Suddenly some creepy man said, he told the cretin to quietly sort everything out. He pushed the guy out of the way. He was a member of the Kent Association, a night class. He had good skills. Level E, perhaps he is one of the association's subordinates. He looks unfriendly. He must be hard to get along with, Kent said rudely to the woman. He had already said that he would not let her anywhere near here if she continued to croak incessantly. He can't understand why she ignores the words of others. He thinks the president has time for someone like her. The goat is indignant that the woman does not listen to him. Although when the disaster happened, it was precisely people like him who did not listen to cries for help. The freak told the newbie to watch carefully to make the person stop doing something. He must do it quickly and with all his strength. Only then will they realize that he really is a complete freak. Hank grabbed the goat's hand, and the freak said they should have rushed him from the very beginning. The freak clearly didn't expect this, and Hank asked him with a creepy look what he was doing. Kent's disgusting behavior greatly angered Hank, who said he asked the boar a question. Then Kent asked who he was, where he came from, and he ordered Hank to get lost. But Hank immediately told him not to take a step, otherwise he would smash his red-headed skull. He is also one of the association's subordinates, hunters. Associations use force against ordinary citizens. He's got it all figured out. Kenta said he was just doing his job. I'm sure the Nazis who killed people said the same thing. Hank said, "Wow, that's some work. He's a new hunter. How can a redhead do that?" But Kent again ordered Hank to get lost while he was asking nicely. But Hank was not going to back down. And he asked, and if not, then Kent said, if so, let him prepare his ass for a spanking. The woman warned Hank that it was dangerous, but Hank said there was no need to worry about him. Victory was always his. This phrase angered Kent. He said such big words for a brat. He would make mincemeat out of him. But then Hank asked. He moved from his place, and they told him not to take another step. Why does he ignore when others tell him, even though he warned him? Hank immediately ran to him. He grabbed the bastard's face and slammed it into the asphalt, and that's when Kent realized that Hank is not a simple newbie. Then Hank began to gloat that Kent only knows how to talk. He still dares to call himself a member of the association. What? He wants to get up. Wouldn't it be better for him to lie down quietly? Kent was furious. He started screaming he would finish him off, but Hank just laughed. Then Hank crouched down, which seemed to frighten our tough guy, who could only beat up civilians. Hank said let him try if he has the guts. Hank began listing Kent's skills. And at the end he added, an imperturbable face on the battlefield. That's the funniest thing. Kenta was scared. He didn't understand how Hank knew about his skills, but Hank grabbed the guy's badge. He said that if Kent represents the association, then let him comply. Kent's sharp tongue suddenly disappeared somewhere. Apparently, the forces were only enough for civilians. Now he's not so cool. And Hank said that what he needs to protect is not the reputation of the Glory Guild. And why are there only hunters around ordinary citizens who pretend to be gangsters? At that moment, the Glory Guild arrived and the leader asked what he had done here. On the territory of the Sacred Association, if he wants to cause a commotion, then let him do it somewhere else. It's time to explain the SS rank, the highest level of human strength, and the hunter himself. Death, defeat, or despair are the dangers that every hunter faces. But these guys are different, because they are not ordinary hunters. They do not know defeat. SS rank hunters never despair or give up, because these are hunters. They can perform real miracles. That's what SS ranked hunters are. Such were Maria and Mr. Hypocrite, that is, the head of the guild. And he said that he came out here because of the noise. It would be great if they defended the city as well as they defend their territory. The chief said that the guy, having accomplished a great feat, not only raised the association's ears, but also attacked his member. The newbie was apparently getting cocky, but the leader's speech didn't impress Hank at all. But the leader wouldn't shut up. He said he thought he could impose his opinion on others because he was strong. What hypocrisy. While he was saying that you need to think with your head and so on, Hank interrupted him saying, "That's complete nonsense." What immediately infuriated the sensitive leader. Hank responded by saying his thoughts out loud without thinking. But if he wants to stop them, shouldn't he do it in the right way? He understands that this whole situation looks absurd. And it's easy for newcomers to misunderstand that it's forbidden to attack members of the association. But can a hunter use his power on ordinary people if it is allowed? Then he apologizes. He wouldn't have stopped him if he knew it was normal. He's talking about whether a knight is allowed to attack townspeople, but since someone as clueless as he is, he got involved in it. That's it. He must be punished, right? The boss started thinking about something. He looked at naive Maria, who was so naive that she didn't see what was really going on. Although maybe she's just stupid and really doesn't know that the boss is a hypocrite. He sighed and admitted that he was wrong. And he said that the hunter who attacked a defenseless person would face punishment. And as for the victim, the fat man next to her turned out to be the vice president, and he said he would take her on. Then he said that he would go first, but the head decided to leave the meeting for later. Hank sighed, saying he was lucky it hadn't gone too far, that's all. He's not leaving, Hank asked. The boss asked what he was doing. Hank replied, he really doesn't know. Well, okay. And he said that the woman was from the area where the disaster happened. She lost her child in that incident, a terrible loss that could have been avoided. Doesn't the president think that this back is too clean? There is not a single spot of dirt on it. It's a nice-looking building, but the area is still stained with blood. He is from there too. He thanks for the excellent protection of the area. He was glad to hear that there were not many casualties there. But what's interesting is why the president wasn't there, Hank asked seriously. He honestly tried to understand them, but they didn't even try to save them. He blames them, although they have nothing to do with it. Earlier, Jin explained that he checked CCTV footage in the area, and he can say that if the Glory Guild had been there, the number of victims could have been halved. Hank told the hypocrite that it wasn't even that. As far as he knew, the boss was hard to deal with. Why did the head of the organization abandon the lives of those whom he could have saved? Let him at least say something. But the chief remained silent, which angered Hank, and then he shouted, "Stop being silent." That's where the hypocrite said, "He's so young, he shows emotion instead of thinking rationally." The guy is too narrow-minded, so he is unable to distinguish right from wrong, and does not understand when it is appropriate to open his mouth. And when he needs to remain silent, he understands that the guy is full of energy, but he must be aware of who he is talking to. And calmly convey the essence of your thoughts. The guy is a human being, not an animal. This made Hank even more angry, and he said that he, an animal, should know who he is talking to. The president knows how to sound convincing. How can he not know who the leader is? He is the #1 knight in Korea, who was defeated by Kang. The sensitive leader was upset. Hank's words seemed to offend the sissy, and he said he was trying to be polite to the newcomer. But does the newbie think that he is going too far? Or is the guy just too confident in his abilities? It seemed that the sissy had managed to forget that the impressionable Maria was next to him, and Hank hoped that the leader would continue talking. Hank summoned his powers, then the leader asked if the newcomer had completely lost his mind. Even if Hank isn't strong enough, he will never bow his head to this hypocrite. Hank said, asking if he is too confident in himself. No one can know for sure until they test themselves. He suggested that the boss test his abilities, while the rich kid stood and drank his juice. People noticed him and started saying that he looked even more attractive in real life. And this irritated the rich kid. He wanted to quickly give them an autograph so as not to attract attention. He brazenly said, "Let them give him a pen and a piece of paper." The guys asked what, he repeated. The guys still didn't understand what he was talking about, and the rich kid said they were going to get his autograph. But judging by the faces of these guys, it was clear that this was not so. The guy answered, "No." However, this did not convince the rich kid, who, with his rose-colored glasses, said, "This popularity, after all, they came up to it themselves." The guy said that the rich kid made a mistake, then pointed somewhere and said that they meant him. He definitely knows this hunter. He is the president and an SS rank knight, and there is someone else nearby. The boss said that he would forgive the newcomer if he apologized immediately and let him make a decision he would not regret. But the little boy raised his hand and said, "It's nice, of course, but his left hand doesn't like it." Then the chief said, "Apparently, the newbie decided to dig his own grave, and it would be an expensive lesson. Although who cares, the newcomer will be an exception, only the hypocrite showed his face." By attacking Hank, as Maria said, the president's joke went too far. She created a shield in front of Hank and said she understood the president's intention. He was demonstrating his power. To inspire the newcomer, it seems that she is truly stupid. Although in every pool there is a fool. Maria said people might misunderstand him. The chief didn't even notice the crowd that had gathered while he was talking to Hank. People believed Maria's nonsense about a show of force and began to praise the guild leader. They started saying that the newcomer won the loss after seeing the show of strength. Then the hypocrite forced a smile and said that he was a little embarrassed to teach a newbie without demonstrating all his abilities. How disgusting, shameless freak. I even want to vomit from the hypocrisy of this man. Hank was furious that his plan had failed, and the boss said that they would be seeing each other quite often from now on. Maria asked the chief to stop, then called Hank and said that she was very sorry. She has nothing to say about the gate incident, but promises to give an appropriate apology and compensation to the victims. Hank must have felt bad about these words. He said that this area is under the control of the Glory Guild, and they were obliged to protect him. Even a 3-year-old child knows this. It turns out they didn't keep their own promise. It was clear that Maria had nothing to say in response. And Hank said that they don't need apologies for show. What they need is the strongest shield. And it's a miracle. Why these apologies and compensation? What's the use of this when people are already dead? Maria admitted that everything Hank said was true, and that he was right. It was on their conscience. Some might think Hank was a little brat, but he got all the attention from these jerks. Those who didn't even lift a finger to protect those people. He is filled with rage when he remembers his sister, who almost died because of them. And these freaks think that they can cover it up with money. Hank was angry at himself for trusting the Glory Guild. He turned around and said that the dead could not be brought back. Maria called Hank to stop them from using people's lives to further their own business. She asked if she could find out the class he had indicated when he applied. Hank replied, "The healer. He also cannot save everyone, but he will not abandon people as they did." He left, and the leader said, "How unexpected. He is a healer. He has a heavy ether for a healer." It looked like he would be an outstanding healer. Hank walked home, still angry that the plan had failed. He had no intention of fighting him, thinking that he would win, because thanks to the scandal that the association member had caused, people had gathered around. But first of all, Maria, she would have intervened and stopped the fight. But at that moment, Hank felt insignificant. He hid his fear well in front of the boss. He was upset that his progress was not as great as he thought. He still had a lot of work to do. Hank came home. It seemed they had guests. Hank said hello to his sister, who was talking to someone. My sister was holding a box with a bunch of junk, and someone was saying that all these things were trendy. Sunny finally noticed Hank and asked when he became friends with her. She's such a cutie. Someone said they were expecting Hank, but Hank didn't seem happy to have a guest. And all because it was Becky. While he was wondering what she was doing here, Becky said hello to him. Hank didn't waste any time, and immediately told Becky to get out of here. Our hero really didn't stand on ceremony. He just went and threw little Becky out into the street. Becky stood up and shouted, "They are friends. Didn't they become friends back then at the market?" If Hank was so heartless towards his only friend, she came. To see him, little Becky tried to look as innocent as possible. But Hank understood this and said, "Didn't Chuck send her? Let her tell him this. If he dares to contact him in this way again, let him forget about their future dealings. He is an important salesman for him, isn't he? If he doesn't want to ruin his relationship with him, then it would be better for him to respect the boundaries of what is permitted." Of course, such cruel treatment of little Becky did not go unnoticed by Sunny. Even though Hank is a talented future hunter, Sunny is the older sister and knows how to raise her brother. She lightly slapped him and asked how dare he throw his girlfriend out instead of inviting her into the house. He didn't think about how much pain it would cause her. He's completely crazy. Let him apologize to her immediately. This touched little Becky, and she ran into her older sister's arms in tears. Later, they got into the car. Becky said she already apologized for contacting his sister. He swears. They weren't going to do anything to her, Hank replied. He knew they wouldn't. Then Becky asked why he reacted so strongly. Hank replied that he was not worried about her. But why should he trust Chuck? Even though Chuck is honest in his dealings, he has too many skeletons in his closet. He doesn't know about his past, his motives, or what Chuck is up to if Chuck placed a dangerous artifact on her without her knowledge. Whether Becky could claim that nothing would have happened to his sister, Becky said, was a difficult question. Father wants to be a good partner for Hank. That's why he sent her personally. Of course, Hank didn't fall for it and said he was just keeping an eye on him using Becky. Becky got it wrong. The flowers of the sun are becoming harder to come by, but the demand for them remains the same. But the association began to keep a closer eye on them. And at such a time, someone appears with such a valuable commodity. No one would take their eyes off a guy like that. But Hank didn't expect them to start stalking him in such an obvious way. Becky acknowledged the surveillance, but added that it was a special case she had never been asked to follow anyone before. She doesn't know if Hank knows, but they're not blood relatives. She calls him father because that's his nickname. To be honest, she is no different from an ordinary homeless person, without a clue. What attracted him to her? Maybe she's special, poor thing. It seems like she's not quite right in the head, Hank asked. She's not the type of girl who thinks she's a princess. Becky told him to shut up and continued to explain that Dad was different from others. He is not an ordinary person, and this scar is proof of that. He still cannot understand it. Why did he do it? The day she was sold on the black market, he looked at her, and he stabbed her in the face with a knife. Then she wanted to commit suicide. She was overcome with despair at the thought that she would have to spend her whole life with such a person. With such thoughts, she met the next day. But that time was the last. Hank decided that she had been beaten so much that she didn't remember anything. Then Hank asked, what else? The last time he threw her into the wall, she forgot. Becky didn't know what to answer. Then asked Hank how he thought the owner of the car died. Hank got nervous and said that things like that scared him. She arranged some kind of psychological test. He should have asked another question, why she drives at all. But Hank asked if she even has a license. Becky decided to avoid the question by saying that she would answer her own question. She asked if Hank had ever heard of the poison poppy, a fairly well-known plant in the dungeons. It looks like a normal plant, but if someone processes it and drinks the nectar, he will lose control over his feelings and will begin to be tormented by hallucinations. In other words, it's a drug. It is highly addictive and easy to obtain, making people addicted to it immediately. But the worst thing is that it does not harm the body in any way, and only causes addiction. It was clear from Hank's face that he didn't understand why this was the scariest thing. So Becky explained, if he thinks it's not scary, then he too will easily become addicted to it. And that's how poisonous poppy destroys human lives. Although it is easy to buy, it costs a lot of money, because the demand for it is greater than the product itself. People can't stop taking it. That's how addiction works. That's what happened to the car owner. It got to the point that he was unable to buy poppy seeds, and therefore was unable to pay his father on time. And what will the father do if the payment is delayed even for a day? The answer is, he will dismember you and feed you to the dogs. A sick psychopath, he doesn't care about human feelings and compassion. Only death awaited them all. People who get on his nerves, people who tried to steal from him, and even those who failed to follow his orders. Becky hated him for this, even began to rebel. She stopped obeying him. Tried to steal money from him. She thought she was going to die when she saw his eyes that day. But he didn't do anything. That's how it was with Becky. But Becky herself didn't know why things turned out this way. However, she assures him that he has nothing to worry about when Hank starts showing off in front of him. If it had been anyone else in his place, Hank would have lost his head that very moment. This is how much he likes Hank. It didn't particularly please our hero, but in the meantime, they got there. Becky came out happily and said that the silver flower of the sun should be in this dungeon. Won't the monsters be much stronger since there is a silver flower here? So she'll hope Hank comes back safe and sound? Hank snorted. And he said, let him not get worked up. He is the king of this place. Our hero became confident. This is good. They entered the dungeon, and Becky immediately began rummaging through her enormous luggage. Finally, she found what she was looking for. Let's leave out the fact that she was carrying a machine gun in her bag. Hank asked what it was. Becky replied that the ampule her family had recently invented was perfect for luring monsters. Becky seemed proud of the vial, saying that the technical capabilities of the black market should not be underestimated. She suggested setting up a trap first. You need to dig a hole, then pour this liquid into it and wait. And while Becky was explaining their plan to Hank, Hank simply poured the potion all over himself. Becky got scared and started screaming. She was tired of living. If she wanted to die, let her do it alone. But our confident boy told her not to worry and asked if he just needed to kill them all. Becky called him a fool and threw him a ball. She said it would neutralize the poison. Its effect lasts only 3 hours, so you need to keep an eye on the time when time is running out. She would get out of here on her own, so he shouldn't be left behind. Hank admitted that she was well prepared. Just to keep an eye on him, he was even flattered. Becky was silent for a moment. And then she said that she hadn't forgotten what he had done earlier, and hoped that he wasn't trying to press on her feelings again. Hank said, okay, he understood, and said she might not bring the pills next time. Becky objected. The poison could kill, but Hank repeated that he didn't need the pill. Hank didn't answer her, only said that he felt at home here, when suddenly they heard a noise. They were monsters. They came running towards the smell. It was time for Hank to run away while he was running. The black market is a place where they do more than just sell all sorts of things, right? With that in mind, they shouldn't be underestimated. Hank had no idea the effect would be so strong. There are 200 monsters here. It probably doesn't matter how many there are. Hank kept running, because it won't change the fact that they will all become fodder for his self-improvement. Hank chose a place to fight, a large open field. Then he activated his abilities. Level 2. Hank got around the crowd of monsters in a couple of seconds and made a bunch of hits. All the monsters just exploded. The other monsters, seeing this, decided to run away, but the demon caught up with them. Hank made small cuts on them. At first the monsters didn't understand anything, and then the poison killed them. A pleased Hank said, even a little too easily, the acceleration ability is perfect. To fight low-level monsters, Hank simply walked around and waved his knife. Then he wondered if there were other skills besides the white sleep that put enemies to sleep. Perhaps he should have asked that time. No, his pride would not have allowed him to do so. Only a little time passed, and Hank had already killed a whole crowd of monsters and was sitting on his mountain. It seemed he had destroyed all the low-level monsters, so Hank decided to check the status window. He's leveled up quite a bit during this time. The speed of leveling is incredible. He's reached rank D, and in a very short period of time, he will be able to become stronger, much faster than he expected. It's unlikely that these monsters have a silver sunflower hidden away, although something is clearly wrong here. Hank wondered if the flower was really somewhere here, even though this was a dungeon. But it's strange that after the forest there's a desert right away. It's really suspicious. Hank noticed something in the distance. He came closer, but he shouldn't have done that. A monster suddenly jumped out of the sand. Obviously, the boss of this dungeon is this terrible monster, and the boss was not small. However, Hank wasn't worried. Hank had already told Becky that they wouldn't be staying here for long. But it seems that Hank miscalculated a bit. Hank jumped towards the monster and used a poison step. Becky sat bored. The antidote was about to wear off, and Hank was late. She began to wonder if Hank had left her alone in the dungeon while Hank fought the monster. And it looks like Hank was in trouble. The monster's shell is damn strong, impenetrable. Hank had landed hundreds of punches and only managed to get a scratch. At this rate, it would never end. But it's better to forget about how to finish off the monster and think about how to survive the monster's attacks. The monster's claw approached Hank, and he jumped back, no matter how strong his shell was. He must have a weak spot. This creature doesn't care at all about wounds on his body. If he had delayed even a little, he would have turned into mincemeat. Hank needed to quickly change his plan. He couldn't finish off the monster using physical attacks alone, and fighting while riding her was still dangerous. The terrain doesn't play into his hands either. Hank could use a poisonous move right now. But to activate it, you need to hit the ground, use a poisonous step on an unsteady sandy surface. Its effectiveness will be reduced by more than half, but Hank is still lucky. He will be able to find the silver flower of the sun from above much faster than from the ground. Although it has a faint glow, a silver flower in the middle of the desert, it is definitely him. However, everything is going too smoothly to be true, even though he just needs to get there. But without the speed advantage, Hank won't be able to forget about this giant. First, he needed to get the most out of the poison step. Hank just wanted to use that technique. But the sand collapsed under him and he couldn't use the equipment. Hank decided that he was finished. The monster hit Hank and he flew back. It was terribly painful. It felt like all his bones were crushed. If she had hit him with her head, he definitely wouldn't have survived in that situation. He couldn't win. Hank healed himself. If he had help, he could have taken the flower and run away. Since his blade can't pierce her armor, it will be useless to use white sleep. Hank was cursing his dagger when suddenly the dagger opened up. It seemed like the dagger was transforming. The dagger has changed shape, and now it has become boots for Hank. An acceleration mode has been added. Hank was delighted. It was as if he was standing on a solid surface now with these shoes. He will be able to penetrate the monster's armor, Hank became more confident. The monster approached Hank. Hank used the poison step. Finally, the technique worked and he could escape from the monster. He dodged the monster's tail and ran to the flower. Hank grabbed the sunflower. It's time to finish off this monster. Hank changed the dagger, used the white dream form. It would be nice to take the core with you after killing the boss. But unfortunately, this dungeon is under the jurisdiction of the association. He'll have to retreat. If he screws up, everything will go down the drain. Even his becoming a hunter will be in jeopardy. All that remains is to use white sleep and pierce the centipede's body with sleeping poison. If the monster dies, the dungeon will disappear with it. So he has no other choice. The problem is that he can't pierce the shell. The Exa dagger reacted to his words about her uselessness. In other words, there is a high probability that his will and the Exa are connected to each other. Since the boss has a physical level of A, he will not die if you try to pierce his body. Therefore, it needs a form that can penetrate strong armor, an ideal form to pierce the enemy's body. Hank threw his weapon straight at the monster's body. Using all his strength, he would pierce its armor. Just one time will be enough. The drilling worked. The dagger passed through the monster. Finally, the monster fell. It took much longer than planned, and then he remembered Becky. It had been 7 hours since they had entered the dungeon, and Becky was already preparing to kill him. But Hank didn't suspect anything. He was so happy that he could sell it and not worry about money for a while. Soon he saw Becky. She was clearly not in a good mood. Hank asked if Becky was still there. He waved to her and said he was a little late here. She wasn't offended. But Becky asked, "A little, that's all he can say before he dies," Hank asked. "But something is wrong," Becky answered. "He was gone for 7 hours. 7. Hank, without looking Becky in the eyes, apologized. She continued to swear, and Hank noticed that her body was covered in spots. Even though she took the antidote, her body was not able to withstand it. Such severe poisoning. Judging by her condition, she is already at her limit. All this time she was waiting for Hank. And she didn't just wait. She prepared herself for the fact that Hank could get seriously hurt. She wanted to save him. Sweet Becky was worried about him. How sweet. Hank was touched and thanked her. And at the same time he healed Becky. She felt the same feeling as then, warm and relaxing. Becky was delighted, and Hank asked Pori to take the remaining poison out of Becky. After a tense battle with the centipede, 2 whole months passed. Becky gave Hank the information. About 15 poisonous dungeons, so he was able to get another silver flower and 5 bronze ones. Now Hank is more content than ever with his carefree life. A happy Hank watched his treasure. Becky shouted, "The ramen is ready. Let her set the table." Hank obediently said, "It will be done." He even called her hostess. It seems their friendship has become stronger. Hank complained that she didn't add cheese to the ramen. Hank proudly said that he could now afford cheese. Becky replied that she had forgotten about it, calling Hank captain. The 3 of them look like a family. Becky is leaving tomorrow. Hank is even a little sad. They became quite close, and Hank also began to worry about Becky. Every night she repeats the same words, "Daddy, don't do this. Why did you do this?" Becky probably doesn't even know what she says at night. She begs her father, says that she will fix everything. She begged him not to sell her, no matter what. She is left with a scar that she is unaware of, hearing herself say Papa instead of Dad. Perhaps she is dreaming of her biological father, and not Chuck. Although both are worth each other, Becky had a hard time in life. In the morning, Becky and Hank got ready. Sunny, as the older sister, began to explain to them what is allowed and what is not. Then she called Becky and said that 2 months had already passed since their meeting, although not that much. But Becky needs to know that she is like a little sister to her and can visit them anytime. She will wait for her. Becky probably felt such warmth and love for the first time. Hank nodded too, but he himself doubted that she would have any free time anytime soon. Little Becky burst into tears and said that she would definitely visit her older sister. Hank really hoped that she would actually be able to come to them one more time. They had come to the black market. And then Hank noticed that the market had become calmer before. Every time someone would start a fight here. Becky seemed offended by this. She asked, "This is how he sees the black market. They don't fight 24/7. But just at that moment, 2 men started fighting in front of Becky and Hank. Hank decided to gloat and said, "Just like he said, there's always someone fighting here." Then he asked if she was going to separate them. It seemed like everything was getting out of control. Becky replied, although it was true that in the black market the weaklings had themselves to blame. But the seller doesn't just allow himself to be beaten. One person is responsible for the chaos here. The man shouted, "Enough! If he doesn't stop the fight, he won't be able to stand aside and watch." But the guy just puffed himself up and walked up to the man, then asked who he was. The man apologized for confusing him. There was something in his voice that seemed to resemble the same pressure that Hank felt from the head of fame. "Is it possible that he is as strong as the head?" the man said. "The father is the only person who rules this place, And he, just one of the order team, Hank decided that the man must be strong. Becky asked how he knew how strong he was. Hank lied and said it was intuition. The bandit turned out to be very strong, physical level. B, member of the Tiger Guild, Kevin. Kevin called the man and insulted him, saying that he was the one who was taken advantage of, that he was the victim. Or perhaps the policeman is one of those who turns a blind eye to scammers, the man replied. If a deal closes on the black market, it closes for good. Kevin sent the man and said he would just beat the crap out of him. He attacked the man. The man sighed and said, well, he gave him a chance, but the guy created his own problem. Soon, Kevin was already beaten and exhausted, but he did not want to give up. Kevin said it's not the end. The more he fights, the stronger he becomes. Berserker's special ability increases combat skills at the sight of blood, but the longer the effect lasts, the faster the owner loses their mind. What a monstrous ability. It can be seen from the growing ether. This guy is no longer a B-rank knight. Kevin grinned and asked, already shitting his pants, if he valued his life, let him beg for mercy. Although he won't hold back in any case, judging by the amount of ether he's releasing, Kevin's strength is now comparable to that of an A rank. He is clearly stronger than many, but he cannot handle this man. Kevin hit him. But the man was no longer there. This made Kevin even more angry, and he cursed that such a pathetic trick would not work. What nonsense! The man redirected Kevin's blow back at him. The technique is incredible. This man's technique was similar to Suo's technique from Windbreaker. Hank was impressed. No matter how hard Kevin tried to hit the man, it was all pointless. He incredibly dodged the attacks. The man said the guy was just punching the air. Apparently he saw ghosts. Finally, the man decided to attack Kevin, but somehow there were 3 of him. And now Kevin was already lying on the ground. A fantastic finish. He rarely uses powerful techniques. Apparently this guy was quite strong, Becky explained. She admitted that Hank had excellent intuition. She said it had been a long time since she had had this much fun, and she needed to contact the rest of the law enforcement squad, so they could deal with this intruder. But Hank didn't listen to her. He was shocked. He couldn't take his eyes off the man and thought, he's a real monster, and this is only part of his power. Even after such abrupt movements, he was not at all out of breath. Besides, that was his movement. His physical skills are like a knight, but when the illusions appear, it seems like he is an esper. Hank decided to test the man's abilities, but the records had been deleted, leaving only basic data available. Name Jade, 49 years old, trait undetermined. Most of the data has been erased. It is likely that little is known about him because most of the data has been removed. And this information is of no use. He tried to find out his physical level. Hank thought it would be A or SS, but then this information was suddenly revealed. And Hank saw that it was level E. He thought, this is impossible. There is no way that someone with that rank could handle an A rank. Hank was so focused on his thoughts that he didn't notice that Jade was already standing right in front of him. Jade said hello to Hank, and Hank almost had a heart attack. Jade said he didn't mean to scare him. Then he apologized. Hank was embarrassed. He felt awkward that he yelled like that. And darling Jade said he heard Hank thinks Becky is in sales with his father. If Hank doesn't mind, he can take him to his father. Hank still hasn't come to his senses. Hank came to Chuck and showed the flowers. Chuck said that he would give 7.5 billion won for everything. Chuck asked, the kid seems to be raking in money. It's time for him to throw off the stigma of being poor. So, could Hank please stop doing this? It's disgusting. Apparently Hank's first kiss was with a suitcase. But Hank said that it was none of Chuck's business. Chuck said that his hands were itching to beat Hank to death. Then he asked if he had heard Hank had applied to take the hunter exam. Maybe he could find out why, Hank replied. Chuck had already realized that healing was one of his abilities. And he is different from ordinary hunters. He did this for personal reasons. But also because he won't be able to prove himself as a hunter using his main skills. That's why he decided to become a healer. There are other reasons, but he can't talk about them. Any more questions? Hank asked. Chuck answered, that's all. They'll close today's deal. But Hank asked, but there is still something left. Right, Chuck tensed up and said, I have no idea what Hank is getting at, but I'm willing to listen. If only he dares to fool him. Or play the fool, let him be prepared for the consequences, Hank replied. There is no need for intimidation. Hank replied that there was one more thing left that Chuck hadn't paid him for. Chuck asked what it was. He had already given him more for the flowers of the sun, Hank replied. Information? Chuck did not pay for the information he had just provided. Chuck seemed to be losing his temper. He nervously pounded the table and said that he had found out everything he wanted. What if he doesn't pay Hank for it? Hank replied. There's no point in these jokes. Chuck is the most trustworthy person he has ever met. And he is also an important client for Chuck. Pay money for information or call into question their relationship, which Chuck is willing to sacrifice. Chuck said 95 points, which wasn't even stated in their deal originally. He likes this confidence. Hank asked why Chuck took off 5 points. Chuck answered because Hank is rude. Well, Hank couldn't deny that, and Chuck asked what Hank wanted, more money. But Hank surprised Chuck by saying that he didn't need money, but this man, or rather, his equipment. He wanted Jade to teach him her techniques. Chuck began to think about this offer. And then he decided that something didn't add up, he told Hank. Even if you take into account those 750 million. What Hank just got was not enough. Hank knew Chuck would say this, and answered. Even though it was risky, he would still learn it from Jade. Even if it meant becoming indebted to Chuck. He seemed to have gone crazy. Becky also decided. She called him in a whisper and asked what he was doing. Father turns people into mincemeat. Just one has to anger him. Hank froze. Hank knew it was a little dangerous, since it was Chuck and no one else's business. Becky's reaction was expected. Chuck asked why Hank would go so far. Hank responded. He watched him for only a moment, but it was enough. Power like Jade's is worth the risk. The sender's power is capable of much, but his skills are still not enough. All the previous battles, Hank did not leave this feeling. He won thanks to his excellent maneuverability, but without it, he is no different from the newbies, who only knows how to swing a sword and use the same skill. He will not become stronger. As for Jade's abilities, in most cases, after awakening a hunter, there is very rarely any jump in rank. The martial art is so strong that even the system can't appreciate it. Hank threw the suitcase and said he would do everything to get the full amount. They were running out of time, so Hank asked if Chuck was willing to make that deal. If Hank can learn Jade's technique, it will help him greatly in the future. Chuck laughed and said, yes, Hank is desperate. Hank didn't try to hide it. Then Chuck said, well, alright, he'll make a deal with him. Now isn't quite the right time. But he would call Hank when everything was ready. Only Becky asked Jade's opinion about this deal. Jade agreed to carry out any order Chuck gave, and Chuck, gritting his teeth, said he could take the money. He won't get anything out of this pittance anyway. He'll name the price after the training is over. See you at the next deal. But before he left, Chuck asked Hank. He casually asked if Hank would like to learn something from him. Hank immediately refused. Then Chuck burst out laughing and wished Hank good luck, and Hank himself said that he didn't want to die yet. He finally finished what he couldn't do for a long time. Only the exam remained. Becky called Hank over and waved sweetly, saying good luck. She would kill him if he failed the exam. Hank laughed and said, he'll be the first one to pass. The crimes committed by metahumans are becoming more and more dangerous, and it is no longer necessary to stand aside and be just an observer. Those who possess great power, those who have a prevailing sense of justice. The Hunter Qualification Exam is held once a year and is known for its high demands on examinees. Being a hunter makes you more popular than celebrities, even though it's just a test. The whole country is following this event, in such a stream of heated discussions and excitement. The annual hunter exam began, and 2 guys were discussing something. The guy asked if he thought anyone of SS rank would show up this year. The second guy shouted enthusiastically, SS ranks are undoubtedly of great value. However, he thinks that this is unlikely. It is interesting how the puppy and the snake met. The puppy cried joyfully, don't hunters exist to protect civilians? Snake reminded his friend that only bandits have been bred among them recently. But Puppy said that he was sure that this year a new star would appear among the hunters. The snake asked, like that cute freak. People surrounded the candidate for the hunter Jasper. Someone was stupid enough to call Jasper modest. The journalist asked, they say Jasper registered as a healer. Can he explain the reason for his chosen class? And then the rich kid started lying that he wanted to save people, and that was all he needed. He covered his lies with sugar as best he could. But people, of course, bought into this game. But his whole game flew past the snake. He said, Jasper is definitely past. He has no sense of duty. No responsibility for his strength. No different from other bandit hunters. Wanting to save people is sheer nonsense for him. The status of a hunter is just a stepping stone. To get a higher position, the puppy was very surprised. He did not expect this. And the snake continued. The president of the association went crazy. Ken is corrupt, and dirty rumors are circulating around the head of Gideon. Although he pretends to be an exemplary hunter with a huge enterprise behind him, in reality, he is worth nothing. The reality is that people don't trust him as a hunter. If you think about it, there was one person a long time ago. Although she was forgotten because of that incident, she was the only one in the whole world that everyone could trust, the strongest huntress. It turned out that Carrie was very popular. Even now people talk about her. But the snake told his friend not to talk about it. Otherwise they'll throw him in jail, the puppy asked. Is it really true that there isn't even one good hunter to be found today? If you think about it, he is too pessimistic, the snake replied. He is not a pessimist. It's just that their world has long since rotted. But the puppy said, and yet, he is sure that not all is lost. There are probably still hunters with great potential. And for those who think of others first, A new SS rank hero will definitely be born today. Our little one changed his hairstyle. Sadly, meanwhile, the rich kid was at a photo shoot. The photographer asked Jasper to pose, and he willingly posed for the photographer. The photo session ended, and the photographer asked Jasper to look at the photos. The photographer said there were so many good shots, he couldn't choose just one. Jasper's ego must have gone through the roof. The man licked Jasper from all sides, screaming that he had no equal in this industry. Jasper thought, what nonsense. It's not about the photographer's skills, but about the fact that he managed to work with an amazing model. What a modest guy. He thought that was why mediocre people irritated him. It's funny. He was the one who was mediocre. The photographer asked to take another photo for the headline. The title will be The Savior of the New Generation, who will become the successor of Mary. He could only hope for this position, because a truly cool healer was behind him. The photographer suggested taking a couple more photos with different concepts for the future. He decided to take photos from a further distance, so Jasper moved away a little. The photographer shouted, "Follow him, be careful," but it was too late. He collided with Hank. Well, a drama happened before people's eyes, and the photographer did the right thing by photographing it. Jasper wondered what the hell was going on here. A romantic scene between rivals. Hank asked Jasper if he was okay, and Jasper wondered why he was being photographed with such a freak. Who did he call a freak? It seems like something is wrong with Jasper's head. Hank said that he could heal him if he was injured. Jasper thought, let them remove the petals. Because of this idiot, even their manhwa genre will change. The boys stood up and Jasper was still very annoyed. Hank didn't understand why. Hank asked Jasper if he was okay, but Jasper just looked at Hank. And Hank sweetly offered to pay the dry cleaning bill. He would give me his phone number. The kid didn't finish speaking as the asshole threw Hank's phone on the floor. What a horror. The screen was destroyed. Then Jasper said in a mocking tone, "What a pity." His hand trembled. What to do? He took the phone and handed it over, saying, "Here's his phone. He'll send money for the repairs later." He said this loudly, and then came closer and quietly said, "Could the guy stop drawing too much attention to himself? Today he is the center of attention, and it will be strange if all the attention is on the guy. Let him remove phrases like dry cleaning bill from his vocabulary, because his clothes are from the donation box. He hopes that the guy has finally realized what's going on, and that it's better if he doesn't see her." Jasper's disgusting behavior had angered Hank greatly, and he was not going to stand by. He called the bastard and said that he was putting up with too much with his rotten tongue. He wants to say that he knows who made these clothes. The clothes are from his sister, so Hank got angry. And he ordered him to apologize, calling him the son of a street dog, unfortunately. A crowd gathered at that very moment, but Jasper only snorted. Suddenly, they announced that the first test had begun. Candidates were asked to gather around a device that measured a person's metastatus. The crowd left, and the arrogant Jasper asked Hank if he wanted to make a bet with him. Hank thought he wasn't just a healer. He also had night abilities. Something was fishy here. Jasper said the rules are simple. If the guy's stats are higher than his, the guy wins. If they are lower, he loses. And the loser gives 10 million won to the winner, meaning that if the guy wins, he will give both the money and an apology. Jasper once again mocked Hank by asking if he wasn't afraid of those 10 million. Hank replied that everything was fine with him, and that he would kill him if he decided to change the rules. Little Hank recorded their conversation. The guys gathered in the hall. Maria spoke in front of him. Something was bothering her. She asked if Jasper had had so much ether before. She is sure that he was at the E rank level when they first met. But the ether that is coming from him now is not lower than B rank. Jasper was happy that Maria was looking at him, and Maria thought Jasper was not an official hunter. Therefore, he would not have been able to enter the dungeons it was necessary to defend the gates. Hank had already been in the dungeon more than once. Maria asked what the president thought. The head replied, "No idea. He is not as sensitive to the air as he is." Then Maria thought, the president is avoiding the conversation again, like a couple of months ago. There were rumors that Jasper visited their research lab quite often. She wouldn't mind if he came there to look at new inventions or to take a tour. But what if he got involved in some kind of experimental program? After visiting the lab, Jasper received a huge amount of ether. Maria decided that something was definitely wrong here. She decided to find out more about it. Maybe she wasn't so hopeless. It was Jasper and Hank's turn. Jasper asked if the guy had at least 101. Hank replied, beaming with happiness, unaware that he was digging his own grave. The guy asked Jasper and Hank to stand in front of the measuring device. Egghead said finally, "The most promising hunter of this year is Jasper." Jasper walked confidently past people who were discussing what his result would be. And Jasper himself thought, these simpletons are only good at talking. Well, let them watch carefully. He will show these losers how different they are from each other. It seemed like the lab rat was proud of its power. The ball lit up. People asked, so much ether. The guy announced that candidate Jasper passed the test with a score of 9,103 points. People were so happy, as if they had achieved something. They said that Jasper would take first place this year. Jasper smirked and thought, fed up, that he wouldn't be able to overcome such a gap in points. What was all the arrogance for? It was not too late to back down, but Hank calmly approached the ball. Jasper gloated. He asked, he wants to prove that he has balls, but pride will not help. While Jasper talked and told Hank that his family would be proud of him for his courage, because he went against him. He didn't notice Hank's bright light at all. Even the guild leader was shocked. Hank finished the test, wondering what the result would be. But Jasper was noticeably nervous. Sweat was pouring off him in streams, and the employee announced, "Candidate Hank passes a test with a result that cannot be calculated." People started discussing that this had happened before. Maybe the device was faulty. Jasper burst out laughing and said, of course he wasn't laughing at Hank, just, "This happens extremely rarely, when the points are so low that they cannot even be counted. What nonsense." Jasper scoffed that Hank must have used staged lighting. Snake passed by him, lightly brushing Jasper's shoulder, and that was enough to anger Jasper. But the snake asked everyone to step aside due to a malfunction of the device. The candidate would have to undergo the test again. Snake was the head judge. His name was Hell. He asked the other candidates to step aside. And the puppy's name was June. The head judge came up and said hello to Hank. He apologized for the trouble and asked to go through the test again. Hank asked about this. The judge replied, yes. This device has higher sensitivity, so it is able to measure even low ether readings. The gangster said he remembered. The egghead asked what he was talking about. The gangster replied, he sees that thing. The golden core is a high-quality item used on bosses in dungeons with a 7-star difficulty level. An incredibly valuable artifact. Not for monsters with low ether, but for those whose ether is so high that it cannot be measured. The chief judge said he didn't expect anyone so high up on the air to be here. Before this, only one hunter had been tested using the golden core, but the result remained unknown. However, today the core was able to establish the result. Hell congratulated Hank on the result. As soon as people heard the result of 100,000 points, they started screaming at once, and the reporters went completely crazy. They started calling other reporters and recording what was happening on camera. Everyone ran towards Hank at the same time. Past Jasper, it seemed the guy was in a bad mood. And Hank himself wasn't particularly happy. He was scared that reporters surrounded him and asked questions. Clearly not expecting such attention, Hank asked the reporters to step aside. But no one listened to him, so Hank used a poisonous step and ran away from there. Before the people could even blink, Hank was gone. Hank complained that they almost questioned him. It was dangerous. Hank approached the defeated Jasper and asked, "It seems they need to discuss something." Jasper was so angry that he rubbed his finger until it bled, and Hank was waiting for his apology. Hank said, "He can't hear anything." "Louder, stop mumbling." Hank continued to press. Jasper was so childish that he couldn't even ask for forgiveness for his own mistake. Hank got tired of waiting, then threw him a piece of paper and said, he wrote down his account number, and let him not delay with the money. Hank left, and Jasper was dramatic, crying blood, and said that he would kill Hank. The most painful death that will kill him. Jasper was left without fans. His ego shattered into pieces. Bishop Guild Deputy Owner Gray said, 100,000 points, Bishop Guild Master Red replied. The maximum number of points that a golden core can show is 100,000. This means that no one knows exactly what this guy's ultimate level is. He already knows it himself, but they need to lure this guy to themselves, Gray replied. Of course. Especially considering the fact that last year they had cranes that were promising hunters. So this year, no matter what, Red said. These memories make me want to puke. We have to be on our guard. This time they will never let anyone else take this guy away from them. But the chief still couldn't get over what he saw, he said. And he thought that the newbie was just a brat. But, as it turned out, the brat is a real dragon. The first test is over. Now it's time for the second one. The kitten was injured. Hank needs to heal this animal. The first test evaluates your potential, while the second tests you in practice. The amount of ether already speaks volumes, but the next test is more comprehensive. We'll evaluate your real healing abilities. All goals. Poor babies. If you can heal the monster, you pass the test. However, there is something strange about this test. While others had little monsters, Hank had a huge kitten. This giant seems much stronger than that centipede in the desert. I wonder how they caught him. And besides, he looks different. What kind of hell did this monster come out of? Hank asked. He thought, that guy is the son of the vice chairman. This freak definitely had a hand in this. This is too much for normal testing, even looking at the monsters of other candidates. They all belong to the lower category. In other words, weakened monsters. These monsters can be healed by almost anyone. Whoever passed the first test, this will be much more difficult than Hank thought. Hank asked how he could cure this giant. Suddenly the kitten stood up and called Hank, asking if it was he, the man, who would kill him. Hank wasn't very surprised, and even though it was a talking cat, Hank asked why he would kill it. The cat replied that people were still so good at pretending to be fools. They were the ones who destroyed his core. Hank said the core was destroyed, and this one would be more difficult, but he wasn't here to kill the cat. And in order to save him, the cat said, "He told me that his core had already been destroyed. What an obvious bluff." Hank replied that whether he was bluffing or not, let him decide for himself, seeing that the death of the cat would also bring him a lot of problems. He had to save the cat for his own sake. Hank began healing, and people watched him. Red said the candidate really is different from the others, even despite his airtime. "There's no way he has any experience in healing. He's a newbie," the cat told Hank. "This is not the first time a person has tried on healing skills, rather. These are human abilities, who worked on them day and night. In this case, a person must understand that by healing him, a person also puts his life at risk." Hank replied, "Don't worry. If the cat dies, he won't pass the test." The cat asked, "Is he risking his life for the sake of the test?" And he wants him to believe his words. If he doesn't want to die, then let him stop right now. Hank asked why he cared so much. It seemed like the monster wasn't a bad monster at all. There is no need to worry about him. He is stronger than he may seem. Let him sit quietly and wait. When he finished, the cat asked, did he want to say that a person would be able to heal these wounds? Hank smirked and said, if he wants to heal, he can do even more than that. The monster said what an unusual person he is, and treats him like one of his own kind. "Isn't it natural for people to be hostile to monsters?" Hank replied. "In general, that's true. Monsters usually kill people to fill their stomachs, and they can't help but hate them. But this is no different from how people behave towards each other. If you think about it, there might be monsters that can save a person's life, right?" And so Hank finished the healing. And not just healing, he also left one bonus for the cat. Kitty asked what bonus the man was talking about. Hank reminded him that he had promised him a bonus before the healing. Hank quietly loosened the chains on the cat's body. In fact, he himself didn't expect it to work. The cat asked, "But the man is just a healer." Hank told the cat, "He is partly right." But Hank couldn't reveal all his cards. Hank said that the cat could run away from here when the time came. Kitten told Hank that it was the first time he had met such a fool as him. Well, that was quite a compliment. Suddenly the cat said that why he believed Hank, as with that woman, he was experiencing such feelings for the second time. Then the cat confessed to Hank that he was not a monster. He was what people call a spirit. He is the guardian spirit of the great spirit world, the Imperial Tiger. Then asked Hank's name. Hank stated his name and said he was going to become the strongest hunter. Kitty said that Hank has a great name. He is giving part of his life into Hank's hands. Hank thanked the big guy for his trust. The cat asked if Hank had just called him big guy. Then Hank replied that the cat was very big and a tiger, so he would be a real big guy. It seemed that Hank could get on even the cat's nerves. He realized that he would have to put up with Hank's performances. In any case, it's time to say goodbye. I look forward to seeing them in the future. The head judge said candidate Hank successfully passes the test. Carrie can be proud of the student. But Jasper couldn't concentrate at all. He couldn't heal the monster's wounds. The employee said that the time was up, so it was time to leave. Jasper, instead of leaving, he started insulting the employee and shouting that he only needed a minute to finish. They announced that the exam time had come to an end and asked candidates to stop using their skills. Jasper dared to insult the chief judge and shook his head. Hell said, "He is here." Not good. The test should be equal for everyone. It seems the judge decided to re-educate Jasper. He recalled that the president tells him to treat everyone equally, but Jasper expects special treatment. By doing this, he humiliates the president. Jasper exploded and started screaming, deciding to look down on his father. His father was far more powerful than any president, and Jasper seemed to think that everyone should do whatever he wanted. But it's time to show him that this is the real world, and he's not the main character. Hell ordered June to kick Jasper out. June was more than happy to get Jasper out of the way. He immediately grabbed him and started dragging him towards the exit. Jasper started to freak out, screaming to be let go, and Hell was irritated. He asked Jasper to calm down and return to his seat. Equality was one thing, but looking at him now, he seems to be suffering from ether depletion, where overuse of his abilities results in a lack of ether in his body. June asked Hell if he should accompany June to the medical unit, but Jasper was reluctant. He kept shouting that he needed a little more time, and Hell asked him to calm down. At that moment, Hank walked by and noticed Jasper, and he was happy to tease him. Jasper noticed him and said, "Just in time, we need to chat a little." But Hank himself was whispering something to him. Apparently, Hank sent Jasper to the far ends of the earth and started laughing because Jasper failed a simple test. This made Jasper lose his temper, and he started yelling to be let go, and even insulted June. Later, Hall was called and he came to that fat man. He turned out to be the father of the spoiled rich kid. He scolded Hell for doing his job and giving Jasper an E rank. Hell calmly replied that Jasper failed the practical part. The apple didn't fall far from the tree, as the son and father started yelling at Hell for no reason. He shouted that Hell had interfered during the exam. Jasper told him everything. He kept yelling and yelling about his stupid son, but Hell just decided not to listen to his yelling. And I thought, what a pity the chairman isn't here, poor guy. He has to listen to Irwin's screams. Hell explained that he was only following the rules, but Irwin had only sent him away. The fat man wouldn't calm down. He kept insulting and insulting. For this, the fat man could have been sued. Hell replied that he had no excuse, so what should they do with the damaged gold core? Irwin shouted, "Does it matter?" He said that the core was completely ruined. Meanwhile, our hunter received a badge from Maria. Now he is an SS rank hunter. Maria said she hoped he could save many lives from now on. Hank looked at the badge. The hunter exam was finally over, and as expected, he was awarded the SS rank. And Jasper barely managed to get a measly E rank. He had too much ether for such a low skill level. Hank gloated to himself, but Jasper deserved it. His arrogance only hurt him. The doors opened and Hank heard a noise. A crowd of journalists had already gathered outside. There were too many of them, and Hank had just passed his exam. They were so quick. They immediately surrounded Hank and started asking 1,000,001 questions. They pointed microphones at him and swore at Hank to answer their question. Then Hank couldn't take it anymore, grabbed the microphone from the journalist and screamed. Everyone shut their mouths. Then he calmly said that there were too many of them, so he would answer everyone at once to make it fair. He was incredibly happy to receive the SS rank, and was not yet ready to give an interview. Then he disappeared. Journalists and photographers decided that Hank had simply vanished, and Hank had simply used a poisonous move. He ran home happily, thinking that no one would catch him, but they had already found him. Fire and Water had already begun to get acquainted with Hank. Each of them introduced themselves. The two brothers decided not to delay and asked if Hank would like to join them. Red said Hank must have heard of the Bishop's Guild. They would listen to his terms. Hank laughed nervously and replied that they seemed to have gotten it all wrong. He had no plans to join the guild. At that moment, the leader appeared and said, of course, that it was impossible to join such a worthless guild. It's just a laugh. Let him join the Guild of Glory. What choice will Hank make? Later, the guy talked about how Jasper received an E rank. He was born with disabilities, although he was extremely lucky that he was able to join the Glory Guild with such weak skills. He looked at the head and noticed that he was in high spirits today. The head actually smiled and said, finally something interesting happened. Nonsense. It's a very interesting incident, of course. He was talking about our Hank. It seems he was quite fixated on him. Hank asked if he wanted him to join the Glory Guild and why he should. Red said the guy was right, and besides, the Bishop's Guild was the first to make him an offer. He didn't finish speaking, and the leader had already ordered him to remove his hand and threatened to deprive him of that hand. Then the little brother got angry and called the chieftain names, summoning ice stakes, which surrounded the chieftain. Then Gray asked the chief if he wanted to die. The situation got tense, and they were fighting for our baby. The head just snorted, and having destroyed all the ice, asked if he wanted him to give it his all. How arrogant, Gray said. It's a pity that Maria isn't around now, because even if the head's entire body was in ice, she could have healed him. The leader ordered Gray to watch his tongue and attacked him. But he couldn't hit. The fire grabbed his fist and the leader said, so that's what it means. The rumors about the strength of their guild weren't lying. He thinks they're so good they can compete with the glory guilds, Red sent him. The fire was also SS ranked, just like the ice cream. Gray called on his powers. The fire reminded him that this was a residential area. Gray apologized, and Red said that it looked like they had already screwed up the proposal. He apologized for them showing such a humiliating side of themselves in front of Hank. But Hank said that he was refusing the offer from the Bishop's Guild. Red asked why. They were not lagging behind the Glory Guild. Hank replied, too far. Their guild is too far. Well, you can't argue with that. But Hank said he might consider it if he could work from home. But the guys didn't seem to like that brilliant idea. Gray asked what kind of hunters work from home, and the light shouted, meaning Hank will join the Glory Guild. But Hank was still sulking, so he said no, even if he died and was reborn again. He would never go there. The chief laughed at Hank's childishness, and he said confidently, it was only a matter of time. And now, the leader was still laughing and saying that in the end, the only suitable place for Hank would be the Glory Guild. Death of a hunter. For hunters who deal with monsters, death is the closest friend. So which dungeon takes the most lives? Poisonous dungeons that contain deadly poison everywhere, or high-level dungeons with incredibly strong bosses? Neither one nor the other. The answer is simple. Dungeons for beginners. These dungeons are quite easy, but this does not mean that they are safe. Many novice hunters underestimate the danger, and they die a senseless death, so the Hunters Association introduced a special rule. Thus, the hunter probation program was created. Even Hank, who has the official right to enter the dungeons, cannot bypass this rule. Hank came to the dungeon and two kids ran up to him and waved at him. The boy's name is Chan, and the girl's name is Cherry, and they are espers, so it seems Hank has become popular among the hunters. Hank said hello and introduced himself, then asked if they happened to know where the others were. Then two guys came up. The purple-haired guy's name was Henry, and the bald one's name was Charles. Charles said he'd heard rumors about Hank, and Hank was a handsome guy. It looked like he'd had plastic surgery. Hank was not thrilled with the compliment, so Hank suggested holding a small meeting. He would have liked to tell him a little about the dungeon, but Henry laughed and said that Hank had a big mouth. And he asked if this was Hank's first dungeon. Of course, Hank lied that it was the first. Although this is the first time he goes into the dungeon as a hunter, he has been there illegally more than 10 times. Henry said, "In that case, how about they do it all for Hank?" Charles said, "Although you can't tell right away, they are veterans of their kind. These guys seem to be very confident in themselves. But they are not SS-ranked hunters." Henry said that they can help Hank if he pays them. "Well, they are just common crooks." Hank asked what would happen if he refused. Henry said then they won't do anything. They're just trying to help the new hunters. Those two had already paid them, and he should give it a try. They wouldn't let Hank down. While they were talking, Hank decided to test them. They were both D-rank knights, and if they really had a lot of experience, this dungeon will be a piece of cake for them. So why is it that D-rank knights can enter any guild? And these guys cleared dungeons for cheap. They specifically choose such easy dungeons to rip off money from newbies. Apparently they were kicked out of their guilds and are now just ordinary vagabonds. And since it's a bit scary to go alone, they take money from newcomers so they can at least have something to live on. To offer such a thing to a SS rank hunter, do they really have some kind of ace up their sleeve? Or they just don't take Hank seriously, which is none of our business what they're up to. Because even if they cross the line, Hank will just finish them off, monsters. Difficulty 1. Two bandits were chopping up the monsters and shouting, "It's easy, they're so weak." These two seem to be very passionate, but why are they trying so hard against these weaklings? If you decide to fight all your life, then you need to do it in the right way. They pretend to fight hard, but they deliberately let one enemy escape. And all this is just because of money. This is starting to irritate. Hank sighed. He used movement. If it had been someone else in his place, he could have suffered. Slowly but surely, their joke goes further and further, and Hank is already getting irritated by the behavior of those two. But the little kids, on the contrary, were excited. They thought the boys were fighting great. "Something needs to be done about this," Hank asked. "They are not going to join them. They gave them that pile of money, even though they said they would do all the work for them. But why don't they take on the weaker monsters?" the kids said hesitantly. "This being their first dungeon." "They lack confidence," Hank asked. "So they're not going to do anything at all. Confidence comes with action. These are level 1 monsters. What's so scary about those monsters? Which are no different from ordinary rats. And even if they are wounded, so what? They have already forgotten who he is." Then the kids gathered their courage and said, "Yes, they are not as weak as they might seem at first glance." Hank was glad he could motivate them a little. That would be more than enough for now. "The main problem is over there. The espers killed a couple of monsters," Henry said. "It looks like the espers attacked, and it didn't seem to make them happy." Henry asked if it was the hands of their dear clients. He told them to just watch from the sidelines, and the kids responded that they needed to do something too. Charles said he liked their attitude, but they needed to keep an eye on Mana. "A rodent the size of a house will show up here very soon." Charles was deliberately scaring the kids. Footsteps were heard, Henry said. "The most interesting part is beginning. An incredible show awaits them. They already know it well, but the boss monsters are not easy, so they will tell you right away. Let them get ready to pay another $1 million. If they refuse, then they will be held responsible for everything." "What will happen to them?" the kids finally objected. "Why should they suddenly be paid again? The contract didn't say anything like that." Cherry tried to reason with them, but Henry made it clear that he wasn't listening to her. Then he showed his true face. He ordered the guys to shut their mouths. "If they don't pay, the monster will eat them without salt. If they are unhappy with something, let them file a complaint with the healer." They decided to put pressure on Hank so that Hank would pay them. They were waiting for his answer. SS rank no doubt sounds cool, but the higher the rank, the more responsibility. Hank still hasn't figured it out. People want it. SS-ranked hunters can't escape other people's attention. Everyone Henry saw was like that. Hank must think it's unfair. He has no experience or skills. He's just a healer who has never fought a monster face to face, Henry thought. The little kids supported Hank, saying that Hank had nothing to do with it. There was no need to drag him into this. But the bandits continued to scold the kids and insult Hank, Henry told Hank. "Let him think carefully. If he doesn't pay them now, they will simply leave the dungeon." with wounds all over their bodies that he would inflict on himself. And he would spread a rumor that the insignificant healer almost killed them. People need a hero, but at the same time, they envy them immensely, which is why the SS rank is far from the best. As it seemed to everyone, and they didn't care that you were just a newbie, the monster had already arrived. Henry wondered what he would do, get angry, or think it was unfair. It would be great if he could film his suffering in the first-level dungeon. What a pathetic guy. Well, it's time to put these upstarts in their place, Hank said when he was a kid. Hunters seemed incredibly cool to him, but as soon as he grew up he realized that they were real pieces of shit. He had never met such stupid people. The guys got scared and then Henry screamed. He forgot who was in charge here. He would tell the media about everything. Hank was behind him and offered to tell a story. On the day of the application, Hunter Gideon personally taught one guy a lesson. And it was him. Hank didn't really want to mention the chapter, but he had to take advantage of everything he could. Now Henry couldn't show off. He realized that Hank wasn't joking and no one would help them. He got angry and started screaming. Henry thought he could kill Hank and somehow hush it up. But Hank was already behind him and asked Henry why he wasn't attacking, deciding to stand still. Henry started shaking in fear and dropped his sword. And then he called them worthless trash. And the reason the boys froze was because of the huge rat, and Hank asked who was in charge now. The guys were silent, then Hank ordered them to answer, but the bandits only shook. Hank sighed and asked what they were yapping about. The half-villains. Did they really still not understand? The media will tell you what kind of mess we're in. What nonsense it would be if he'd wet himself out of fear. Because of such nonsense, he would never have received the SS rank. Where the hell do they get so much confidence from? Whether they froze or their tongues were paralyzed, Hank knew it was too much, but it would be better to teach them a lesson. Well, that's right. So Hank announced that he had a proposition for them. Even if they are unable to answer out loud, have them answer in another way, in the present moment. 2 knights are paralyzed by an unknown phenomenon, but they at least understand how critical the situation is. They find it strange that a healer is capable of something like this. However, if they continue in the same spirit, he doesn't guarantee that they will stay alive. They want him to do all the work for them. Hank jumped sharply towards the monster, but he didn't have a weapon in his hands. He decided to make fun of the monster or those bandits. Hank simply kicked the rat. Then he said the price wasn't that high, only 2 million won, which meant Hank wanted to make fun of the bandits. The bandits still couldn't move, even though they were furious. They knew that Hank was up to something. But there was nothing they could do. The boss didn't take enough damage. The rat just got more angry. The bandits decided that Hank was just a fool and didn't understand anything, and that he was no use. The thought that Hank was deliberately angering the monster didn't reach their empty heads. And yet, thinking since when can healers move like that, Hank began to tease the monster. It finally dawned on them that Hank was deliberately trying to anger the monster, and they became even more nervous. And it worked. The rat got very angry, and Hank calmly said, "What a disaster." The boss got angry. Then Hank stood behind the boys who couldn't move, and called the monster straight to them. The little kids couldn't believe Hank's childish behavior. They decided that Hank was just trying to scare them. But they didn't know Hank. Our hero approached the bandits and asked if they really thought so. What he hates most is the kind of people who play with the lives of others. He doesn't even consider such assholes as people they think they act too meanly. But he really doesn't see any difference between monsters and guys like them. Hank asked with a sly smile if they accepted his offer or not. Henry was trembling with fear and thinking. What this healer means is that he will simply finish them off if they don't listen. He still thought that Hank was a complete amateur with 0 experience in hunting. A useless pauper. They messed with the wrong guy. They shouldn't have gotten under Hank's skin in the first place. The monster was already right in front of them. If they didn't beg, they would simply die. The boys started screaming, and this is understandable because the monster had already opened its mouth. But at the last second, Hank saved these bandits by hitting the monster, then asked, "Now they will make a deal." The monster flew into the sky from just one blow. And at that very second, Hank ran to the other side where this monster was falling. And the guys couldn't believe that a healer could do something like that. SS rank hunters are on a different level. Hank had never officially been to a dungeon before. So before this, he could only wear down bosses to the point of exhaustion. But now it's much easier for him, because Hank no longer has to hold back. Compared to that centipede, no, even the goblins would be stronger than that rat. Hank simply cut the rat in 2, easily and simply. Henry was horrified. He didn't understand how the healer was capable of such a thing. Hank was already standing behind Henry. And he said, Henry thought about a lot of things. He freed them from paralysis. Soon they will be able to move normally again. It happened so fast it was hard to describe, Henry thought. He realized they had screwed up completely. Charles yelled at Hank where he was going. They weren't finished yet, but Henry told him to leave Hank. Then Charles asked why this bastard ruined their deal. Henry shouted, "Enough!" They saw for themselves that even if he attacked him, in the end they would get it. Hank looked at them and wondered what the hell they were doing while the two were arguing. The kids, on the contrary, were delighted with his mercy towards the weak and justice towards his enemies. They praised Hank, and Hank wondered what had gotten into these kids. But since they were just having fun, Hank decided to join them. Of course, the money that Hank took from the bandits, he returned to the kids. But now the kids felt awkward taking them, because it was Hank who killed the monster. Hank said he kept his share, so there was no need to worry. He only asks them to keep what happened a secret, and besides, he has other ways of earning money. That's why he doesn't need the kids' money. It seems like the kids have a new hero today. Chan sighed and accepted that Hank would not back down and would not take the money. Hank answered, "Exactly." He suggested leaving the dungeon, but Chan stopped him. He didn't want to let Hank go empty-handed, and since Hank didn't need the money. Chan handed over the business card. Hank read it. Umbrella Corporation. He had heard that name before. It was immediately obvious from Hank that he didn't understand why Chan gave him the business card. So Chan asked Hank to look at the name. Hank saw the last name. Hank asked in surprise if the director was their father. Cherry promised that they would help in any way they could. "You can contact them at any time. It turns out the kids have a ton of money." Realizing this, Hank was overcome with shame. He had bragged about his earnings to the rich people. Hank suggested they break up again. He was too ashamed to look them in the eyes. At home, Hank counted his black cores. Ordinary hunters are forbidden to consume poisonous cores, but Hank can easily absorb both poisonous and normal ones. Having learned about this from the system, Hank was delighted now he can visit regular dungeons. Hank had just picked up the core when it immediately disappeared, something he hadn't expected. The system showed that the effect was weak, but Hank had acquired a new skill. Now Hank can communicate with monsters, but only with intelligent creatures. He got it thanks to Pori, the time Hank used this ability. Hank wondered if the tiger had gotten out, but he was more concerned about the slow progress. I even started to think whether it was worth it to secretly go into the poisonous dungeon. It lacks a black core. The amount of ether in such ones is several times higher than in ordinary ones. Many experiments were conducted on them, but they all failed. Today, these kernels are considered waste material, but they can be consumed by the kernel eater. Not many hunters engage in core absorption. It is an unwise way to spend money. But this is the most effective way to improve skills, and yet few people do it. That's why Hank was so grateful to Dr. Jean. In general, Hank is concerned about his progress. He wondered if finishing his probationary period sooner would help his progress. If he could absorb something like that golden core, progress would skyrocket. Greedy, Hank wondered how he could get something like that. And at that moment, uninvited guests came to him. Hank asked Pori to hide. Hank opened the door and there stood the snake and the puppy. Hell was smiling surprisingly. Hell praised Hank for successfully completing the dungeon. He introduced himself again. Now he is the former chief judge. And he reminded Jun to introduce himself. Jun shouted his name. It looks like Hell was demoted because of that rich kid. Hank introduced himself awkwardly, and Hell congratulated him on achieving SS rank. Then Hank thanked them and asked what brought them here. Hell asked if Hank felt like he was stuck in a rut lately. Hank was surprised that they were so timely, Hell said. It seemed like they had a lot to talk about. They brought tea and treats, and June happily showed the bag of sweets. And Hell asked if they could come in, and she clearly didn't expect such a sweet smile from the snake. They sat down and Hank explained that they were home alone and wouldn't be disturbed. Hank felt a little uneasy about the modest house, but Hell said it was cozy. Then Hank thanked her, even if it was just an empty compliment. And he said that he would like to know the reason why the guys came to him. Hell apologized for not telling him right away. He asked how Hank felt about the new dungeons. Hank said he was only interested in the ones he needed. Hell replied that many also think that new dungeons are taken on by guilds or hunter associations. But what if even they can't cope with the new dungeon? As Hell said before, dungeons have appeared in several areas. They appeared at the same time, so there is nothing surprising yet, however. A Code Yellow emergency was recently declared in North America. Among the emergency warnings that exist on Earth, Code Yellow ranks third in terms of threat level. The double gates that formed in Hank's area were also yellow. Hank visibly tensed up, his hands shaking, and asked how many people had died. Hall reassured him, saying that there hadn't been a single case yet, and that it was hard to believe. So Hell explained that the Code Yellow was declared because of the peculiarity of the dungeons, rather than because of an existing threat. For example, a monster came out of the dungeon. These two concepts are often confused, but a dungeon and a gate are different things. Roughly speaking, dungeons are a kind of home for monsters, and they do not leave the house. But when the dungeon is overflowing with monsters, the entrance turns into a gate. Monsters begin to break through to the ground, a phenomenon also known as the gate break. It causes countless deaths. But if the monsters come out from the dungeons themselves, nothing can be done about it. The incident was not complicated, so the damage was minimal, however. If this were a third-level dungeon, it would be impossible to assess the damage. Due to the seriousness of the situation, it appears that Mozo is hiding some details of what happened. Mozo World Hunter Protection Organization, Hank said. Hiding the truth won't solve anything. Hell apologized and said he had nothing to justify it with. Hank said he knew it wasn't Mr. Hell's fault. The association is currently experiencing a severe staff shortage. Everyone is concerned about when the monsters will start coming out. And the Imperial Tiger has also been fully restored. It was simply a miracle. Just one session was enough to remove all the poison from his body. So Hell realized that all this time he was looking for Hank, he has unlimited ether. Hank is also a healer, so Hell decided to check on him, but found nothing. And now Hell wants to lure him even more, considering that Hank hasn't joined the guild yet. What Hank has to say about the poisonous dungeons, bingo, is exactly what Hank needs right now. There's no better job for Hank, as toxic dungeons are much easier for him than normal ones. Hell has a pretty good eye. He did a great job of finding a new guy like Hank. But why would he do that? These dungeons cannot be underestimated, even by SS hunters. He hates it when people suffer. If he mindlessly agrees, he will be part of the Hunters Association. Hank asked what he got out of it. Hell looked at Juna, and he happily took something out of his bag. Hall said they wouldn't offer the job without proper compensation. Hank was incredibly lucky today. Hell brought back the cannonball he was supposed to throw away. Hell said that during the test, the core was unable to properly determine the amount of Hank's ether. At first he thought it was Hank, but that's just impossible. Hank answered with a smile, of course, but he himself understood perfectly well that he was still the reason. After all, he himself clearly sees that there is dark ether inside the golden core. Hank lied badly and still tried to divert suspicion from himself. Hell said he was supposed to be destroyed, but he thought of Hank. And he decided that Hank might need it, of course. This was just his premonition. If Hank doesn't need it, he can just sell it, or make holes for a bowling alley. Even though Hell appears calm, he is still testing Hank. Hank could simply absorb the dark ether, but ordinary hunters cannot do this. That's why Hell asked him this question, whether he could find a use for the core. What is Hell's goal? Hank decided to satisfy Hell's curiosity. However, the poisonous dungeon, plus the core, clouded Hank's mind, and he agreed to the deal. A woman holds a bucket of water with a willow leaf floating on its surface, and offers it to a passing traveler, and he puts a willow leaf on top, thanks to which the traveler does not drink it all at once. In order not to cause an upset stomach, the woman knew that, while due to her own nervousness. She was angry with herself. The most important thing was to avoid an upset stomach. Even though he has a circulator, he needs more time with the gold core. But the power of the golden core is not a bucket of water, but rather a storm in the ocean. Hank was dreaming about how strong he would be when suddenly he got punched in the face. He was training with Jade. Jade said that Hank seemed to be getting distracted during training. Hank apologized. Now Jade is teaching Hank the skill of instant recovery. Unlike the others on the black market, he is kind to people. But in reality, the man is crazier than the devil. When it comes to training, he starts beating Hank furiously. Hank already regretted that he had gotten involved with him, because he was facing a real madman. Before Hank could get ready, Jade disappeared in an instant, and Hank got angry. He attacked, but it was an illusion. Even though Hank was CC rank, he couldn't handle Jade. Jade punched Hank lightly. Time for this monstrous training. No, time to become a punching bag. Jade seems disappointed. He had high hopes for Hank when he learned that Hank had killed a hyena. And in the end, Hank lacks even the most basic skills, he asked Hank. He is confident that he has the strength to learn from him, Hank replied. He must. And no matter what the cost, even if he made a deal with Chuck, he can't give up. Hank ran to Jade, but Jade was calm, he asked. That same skill, with which Hank killed the hyena, no doubt Hank has incredible speed. However, for some reason, this makes him think that Hank needs to learn to move properly. With just one movement, Jade turned Hank's attack back at him. Jade didn't react at all to Hank's poisonous move. Hank was learning the hard body, a method unique to the knights that allows them to strengthen their bodies. And all due to the distribution of ether throughout the body. Jade asked Hank to use this method often. Hank said, "Okay, teacher." Jade was surprised that he was called teacher. But he didn't mind. Hank asked permission to ask one question. Hank asked how long the teacher had been honing his technique, and Jade answered honestly. It took about 10 years just to master the basic movements. Hank is clearly not happy with this answer. Becky came to them and asked if this was really their great SS rank healer. Becky asked what Hank was doing. Hank said straight out that he was a mediocre hunter, so he had to practice basic movements. Then Becky asked if he had seen any progress yet. Hank himself didn't know. Perhaps he would understand if he had a predisposition to it. But nothing of the sort happens. Becky asked how about a hint. The technique has one peculiarity. If Hank had known this peculiarity, he wouldn't have had to do all this. Becky herself wasn't sure, but she could definitely tell that when Jade used her skills. It has a specific smell, no, rather an unusual feeling, like a poisonous poppy. Jade's movements really do resemble illusions. There is something that cannot be seen during combat. Such things exist, hunters who use powers that cannot be seen. Espers are such a rare phenomenon that Hank didn't even think about it. Knight or Esper, neither one nor the other, possessor of several abilities. Psychokinesis is the crux of the whole mystery. The teacher uses different abilities. Telekinesis, it seems like Hank is finally on the right track, but how did he suddenly learn it? The form and characteristics vary depending on the host, but the main power of Espers is telekinesis. It doesn't sound very complicated, but it has many uses. The Knight's attacks are also strong, but when it comes to confronting a whole crowd, the guy waved his fingers, and 220 volts, that's a whole other level. The guy with the sour face was a promising Esper named Ethan. The boys clapped and began to admire Ethan's strength. Then Ethan laughed, and he said, "They go crazy from such nonsense." And how does Hank have the abilities of Ethan, the rising hunter? Ethan turned out to be a fool. He bragged to Hank, expecting praise from him. It was impossible to shut this guy up. Hank was already starting to get nervous. Hank should have shut him up faster, otherwise blood was already pouring out of his ears. The boys shouted that monsters had arrived. Ethan jumped up screaming, "Ethan is rushing to help." Well, even though Ethan is a fool, he doesn't look like a villain. But our hero wanted to go home. A little later, Hank asked if their hunter Ethan was valued as much as he was. The girl replied, yes, it was a very promising shot. They had to try hard to attract him. Hank asked if she was also a senior in the Ornafton Guild, although she had special respect for Iran. Then the girl honestly admitted that she simply really liked Ethan. And it seems she's not the only one Ethan has a real fan club. Seeing this, Ethan lit up like a baby and began to demonstrate his strength. What simpletons they are, admiring such simple tricks. But they seem happy. The girl asked what Hank planned to do after the cleanup. They wanted to have dinner. But Hank said that he had already planned a workout, and he wouldn't be able to rest. This seemed to impress the girl, and she began to look at him with admiration. But if she saw Hank training, all the admiration would disappear. Suddenly Ethan shouted, "Everyone come here. This is light straight from the ground. Maybe there is treasure there." While Ethan was happily wondering what could be there, the others' faces darkened. Then the man shouted, "Everyone get ready. This is a double dungeon." The ground beneath their feet began to crumble, and the elders shouted for Hank and Ethan to go to the exit. The dungeon collapses. Ethan froze. The man tried to bring him to his senses. But Ethan stood his ground. He believed that he had to save people. Ethan's face darkened and he asked the elder to wait a bit. But at that moment, the elder fell into the ground. The guild members who were just chatting happily. They died because of simple bad luck. The sparkle in Ethan's eyes quickly faded. Ethan began to blame himself, he thought, if he had known about such holes, if he had not insisted on clearing this dungeon. But it was too early to cry. Hank told him to pull himself together. He would stand there while the people important to him died. Let him run after them. If they didn't die immediately, they can still save them. Hank jumped into the hole. Ethan was scared. He was amazed that Hank was not scared at all. Unlike Hank, Ethan froze in place. He was too scared. But it was more scary to lose loved ones, so Ethan finally jumped. There was little time. It's good that the tunnel was single. Hank asked Ethan to create a shield for his friends. It's possible, but it won't work for everyone. The skill won't have enough range, and there's a limit on the number of shields. 4 people. Hank said that was enough, Ethan asked. Hank fell first. Would they really abandon him? But Hank had his own plan. The dagger flew to him. Hank took over the eldest. The double dungeons turned out to be more dangerous than the boys thought. Hank had only heard about such dungeons, so he reacted late. Many lost consciousness due to the shockwave after the destruction of the dungeon. Hank needs to focus, or he won't be able to save them. He needs support to move. There's nothing to lean on here, but if there's nothing, Hank will simply create support himself. Hank only needs to catch 2. There can be no mistake. And he succeeded. He quickly caught 2 guys. Ethan didn't even understand what had just happened. The guys had almost descended, but a strong wind appeared from somewhere. The atmosphere of the dungeon after the destruction has changed a little, and this is the place. Already inside another dungeon, the guys landed. Ethan ran to Hank. Ethan was surprised that Hank didn't have a scratch. He was definitely human, Ethan asked. Then he remembered his friends and began to turn his head. Hank said they were unconscious and would come to their senses very soon. Ethan burst into tears of happiness. But Hank asked him to calm down. The touching reunion could wait a little. First we need to deal with these monsters. Harpies are flying monsters. Harpies are cunning and wily creatures. The fight will not be easy, Ethan said. Hank nodded, but in reality, these monsters were like flies to him. One blow would be enough for him to finish them off. Ethan began to examine Hank's face. He thought Hank was hiding his emotions. Ethan thought he understood everything. They all experienced severe shock after the fall. A direct collision must be avoided. Then Ethan decided to turn on the hero and told Hank that he admired Hank's nobility. However, he would figure this out himself. Hank looked at Ethan with puzzlement. Suddenly, Ethan was called. All the guys woke up. The eldest told Ethan to stop acting tough. Then he thanked Hank for saving everyone as they came to their senses. They'll take over the fight. It's nice that they're so confident, but Hank would have dealt with it faster. But since they were all so excited, Hank decided to stay away for now. This Esper must be a B rank. He created a bunch of leaves. They flew towards the monsters. This guy is strong enough. He blew up the leaves right in front of the monsters. The guys had already started celebrating their victory, but the guy seemed to be out of breath. But then fear froze on his face. Despite the fact that he put all his strength into this ability, the monsters survived. The battle had just begun. The monsters were advancing, and the guy needed time to accumulate energy. Esper wanted to reduce the number of harpies at once, but he spent all his strength. It seems like the guys are having serious troubles. They are barely able to hold off the monsters. Hunters are people. They feel pain when wounded and get exhausted from long battles. The elder one asked Hank to get out of there, but Hank had a different plan. He just watched them from the sidelines, but the healer's job is to prevent people from getting injured. The elder one did not understand what he meant. She decided that Hank was just joking. She was upset and said that they were losing. Then Hank said that a strange man told him something similar. Giving up without even trying was just ridiculous. The older one decided that Hank was joking. "This isn't the best time for jokes," she shouted, "but he's just a healer. In this situation, they need someone with combat-type abilities. Even though he has SS rank, what can he do in this situation?" It's clear that hunters look down on healers, which is strange, since these are the people who save them. The elder apologized for her words. Hank admitted that healers in most cases take a support role. But doesn't it depend on the individual? Hank threw his dagger to the monsters. "I only managed to finish off a couple of them. They probably weren't close enough." Then Hank decided to get closer. He flew up to the monsters and easily dealt with them. Cutting harpies into pieces is not difficult at all. The problem lies elsewhere. The problem is that there are too many of them. At this rate, he won't have time to return in time for dinner. Hank wanted to use the poison rain. Hank asked his dagger to transform already. There are a lot of enemies here, so you need to fill as much space as possible. The ones in the sky are the most fiddly, so ranged weapons would come in handy here. Some kind of shotgun. It seemed like Hank felt cool with this weapon. He started shooting at the monsters, but the bullets didn't bother them much. Then the boys became worried and wanted to go to help, but Hank told them not to move. If these were regular bullets, they would be of no use. But the bullets from this shotgun, filled with dark ether, the poison finally began to work, and the harpies fell one by one. The weapon, although powerful, required too much ether, causing Hank to feel dizzy. You can't use it too often. Hank got distracted and didn't notice the approaching monster. He was lucky that Ethan was there to kill the monster. Hank thanked him. Ethan was talking nonsense about rivalry again, but the problems didn't end there. After all, it was just when Hank's broadcast ended that the dungeon boss appeared. The monster's level was CC, and Ethan was worried that they might lose. But Hank turned on hero mode and said he had the strength for one hit, and this blow will be enough to finish off the feathered girl. Hank took the dagger and cut his hand and prepared to attack. He used a poisonous step and flew towards the monster. It turned out to be much bigger than I imagined. Hank attacks the monster. This is different from that time with the hyena. He activates the dark ether that flows through his veins. His blood, filled with dark ether, is capable of finishing off absolutely every damn creature on this green ball of love. A report on this week's unusual events: a second dungeon appeared during the Orifton Guild expedition. Several hundred monsters with an average rank of 4 appeared. The boss was most likely rank 6. During the battle, some people were seriously wounded, but all recovered. The boys objected loudly. Ethan and the eldest shouted that they would not accept it so easily. They were angry that Hank didn't want a reward despite all his work. But Hank continued to insist on it. He went down and asked if what he did seemed strange to them. That is precisely why he asks not to tell anyone who he is and let them tell. The fact that the Orifton Guild has cleared the dungeon will be enough. And yet the guys were unhappy. They asked what benefit he got from this. Hank thought for a moment, and the boys tensed up, waiting for his answer. But Hank's answer was too simple. The extra attention was just stressing him out, that's all. This answer greatly disappointed the boys, so they attacked Hank even more vigorously. Hank was fed up with this, and so he quickly ran home while the guys were arguing. They ran after him, realizing that Hank had no benefit from this. But there was something the boys didn't know. Hank had secretly absorbed the monster's core. His sensitivity to telekinesis increased. As Hank got what he wanted, he intended to keep everything a secret. Hank wondered if he should worry about becoming greedy, but decided he shouldn't. A couple of days later, Hank came to some building. He had been looking for this place everywhere. Cleaning guild. For some reason, Hank really wanted to get here. It's time to find out why. This middle-aged man with poor hygiene was the leader of the cleaning clan, Charlie. He drank alcohol as if on the job, and was glad that he had received permission to dungeon the poison. And he hoped that he could bring back the good old days, but he had no one to go with. He decided to call his old friends to ask if they were free, but his friend had just returned from the dungeon and could not go with him to this. His friend asked him if he was still involved in this cleaning clan that doesn't even bring in any money. He tried to convince Charlie that the golden sunflowers were gone. So, it's time for him to wake up and do something else that will bring him income. He didn't want to do this dirty work. Charlie was upset. But he couldn't give up this business for some important reason. Then someone knocked on his door. Charlie opened the door and greeted the customer. He asked what brought him here. But as soon as he saw who was standing in front of him, he screamed in shock, "Hank is already famous." Hank asked if he knew him. Charlie replied, how could he not know him? After all, Hank is the most famous person in South Korea, a new SS rank, who appeared 10 years later, a brilliant healer, a mystical hunter. As many labels as our hero has, Charlie was very excited about Hank's appearance. Having calmed down a little, Charlie asked Hank to sit down and asked again. What brought him here? Hank asked. Isn't this a clan place? That's obvious. He hates unnecessary attention and being restricted, but he heard. While it's possible to join and leave clans without any problem, Charlie isn't by any chance interested in the best newcomer of all time. What a modest guy. Charlie still couldn't believe what was happening. He thought he had passed out after drinking and had dreamed it all. And there was nothing unusual in these thoughts. Anyone would think the same thing if Hank joined his guild. Hank wanted to go into the dungeon, but Charlie stopped him, and Hank didn't understand why. Charlie was even more puzzled, telling Hank it was too much. They go into a dangerous, toxic dungeon, and Hank is wearing only a hoodie. Hank laughed a little nervously and admitted that Charlie had a point. Then he walked into the dungeon, saying that if something happened, he would take responsibility. In the dungeon, Hank easily inhaled the poisonous air and felt great. Charlie was already completely confused, but decided that it didn't matter now. He suggested that Hank start searching to finish it faster before the monsters arrived. Hank waved his pickaxe and said it was his first order, so he was nervous. But it's not time to dig yet. First, we'll have to get rid of the obstacles. The monsters were approaching the boys. Charlie became nervous because this was not typical for devil horses. They usually only attack if you enter their territory. Hank told Charlie to get ready. It was a bit much, but Hank was happy with the new experience points. He greeted them with a smile. Several horses attacked Hank at once. Then Hank swung his dagger. Killing them wasn't particularly difficult. Charlie shouted that Hank shouldn't relax. But Hank wasn't worried at all. He asked Charlie to calm down while he chopped off the monsters' heads. Hank was too relaxed. 2 monsters ran past Hank. He was afraid that Charlie was in danger, but it seemed like Charlie didn't need help. Charlie simply dealt with these monsters with his bare hands. He fights much better than Hank expected. Then Charlie asked if Hank was really a healer. Hank laughed nervously and said that the leader was great. Charlie was embarrassed. He turned out to be talented. Hank wondered where such talent came from in such a guild. Now that the problems are resolved, we can return to excavation, Hank suggested. Charlie decided to show Hank what to do, but Hank didn't look at him. He continued to look into the forest, then said, "The boss is watching them." It's strange. Charlie said he didn't see anything because the boss was far away. Hank asked Charlie to work here. Charlie asked Hank if he wanted to go to the boss alone. This is exactly what Hank decided. Charlie was worried because it was dangerous. But then I remembered how Hank dealt with these monsters and calmed down. And yet, he said, if he needs help, let him call, Hank answered. Okay, and flew into the forest. Hank could feel this boss. Just a little further, and he would definitely find him. A great chance to discover the abilities I've been working on with Jade. Jade praised Hank, but Hank himself did not understand what it was for, because he barely touched Jade's clothes. But Jade explained that it took him 10 years, and now he was ashamed of himself for calling Hank untalented. Hank became embarrassed and said that he just had a good teacher. Jade thanked him for the kind words and then advised him to prepare, because training will now be much more difficult, the second level. But Hank has already surpassed that tiger fool. He simply has to see the results of his training. Hank ran up to the monster. The poor monster didn't know that he would become a training toy. He decided to kill the monster without using his poison. Hank decided to mock the monster. Hank boasted that even without using poison, the monster was no match for him. But the monster was not such a simpleton. The puppy won in the first round. Second round, Hank got up and he was still confident. He told the dog to attack. That's what the dog did, and the blows were much stronger than Hank thought. Round 3. This time Charlie was next to him and Hank asked what he was doing there. Charlie replied that he was finished packing and didn't want to distract Hank from the fight. "So I decided to just stand aside and support him," Hank just said. "He shouldn't have been distracted. It seems he'll get it in full again." And that's what happened. Hank was already tired. It was still too early for him to fight with his fists. There was a huge difference in levels between them. And this cannot be overcome by normal means. As Hank thought, nothing will work without an instant jump. Hank has an exceptional talent for others. It would take 10 years to reach his level. It only took him a couple of months to develop strength, reaction speed, agility, balance. He's above average in all of this, but he can't overcome an instant leap with talent alone. This martial art was created by that monster Chuck, a technique that he created intentionally. To make it difficult to learn, talent is the main requirement for making an instant leap. It's time to admit that Hank can't defeat the monster with his bare hands. He didn't understand what he was missing. The essence of instantaneous leap was more like an illusion than a combat technique. A trick that combines a real body and a phantom. Can it be done without psychokinesis? Although they, the poisoners, can freely control the airwaves. But still, Hank only now remembered that his sensitivity had increased. He simply ignored it then, as he had no idea what it meant. And this could be the key to an instant jump. An instant jump. An extremely complex technique. Talent alone will not help you learn it. It is impossible to use this technique without understanding its principles. Everyone who saw her, regardless of rank, fell into despair. A truly captivating martial art. Hank reacted amazingly to Jade's attack. Even the fact that Hank was able to notice his attack was impressive. This means that Hank has slowly begun to figure this out. Intuition alone will not be enough for this. The feeling of the ether spreading widely around him, he was just getting the hang of it. Therefore, it is foolish to hope for something cool, no matter how hard he tries to imitate this technique. It's just a weak imitation. The monster has decided to attack Hank again. The monster hit Hank right in the stomach. Hank didn't block the blow. The result of spending maximum ether is death, unless you are Carrie's student. This is not the end. The most important thing is the holding technique, Hank told the dog to attack. Everything starts with the basics, and when you get into complex techniques, you can't forget the basics. You have to make sure that your legs move freely no matter what, but that doesn't mean that they should be light. Precision in movements is not so important. Much more important is the combination of speed, balance, flexibility, return, and direction of force. This is the reverse reflection of strength. You need to outsmart your opponent and counterattack. The stronger the enemy's attack, the stronger the instant jump will be. The monster attacked, his hand passing through, blood spurting onto the ground. This technique is beyond comprehension. Hank has finally mastered this technique. The first dungeon was completed, of course, not without serious injuries. As soon as Hank figured out the meaning of his mentor's words, his mood soared. After the first clearing, the guys decided to conquer the dungeon with special zeal. Getting entry was difficult, but hell helped them out. But Hank still doesn't know if he's friend or foe. Until this was known, we had to keep our ears open. For some reason, Pori showed himself. Hank didn't ask him to do this. Charlie wasn't particularly surprised to see Pori. He just looked at him with affection and said hello. Hank scolded Pori for climbing out as if nothing had happened, although it didn't matter. After all, the head of the guild knows about him. He got caught when he warned them about the monsters nearby. Hank asked if the cleaning was complete. Charlie replied, "Yes, it took a long time." There was now a lot of prey. Hank suggested taking a short break. He had a question. Hank asked why the leader became a dungeon cleaner. Charlie replied that he was not as in demand as Hank, and not as strong. Hank knew that this was not the answer, and decided to get to the bottom of it, so he said it. He noticed that the leader was obsessed with the poisonous dungeons, as if Charlie was looking for something. Charlie gave in, and decided to tell why he was going into these dungeons. A legendary flower, this flower has incredible properties, but only in words, an absurd legend that says that he can cure any disease. Hank realized that the leader was talking about the sunflowers, which he had easily found. He asked Charlie if there was a reason for him to be looking for him so desperately. Charlie replied, "His wife. The kindest and brightest woman in the world," Charlie said. He is just a pathetic husband who is unable to save his beloved. He understands that it's hard to believe that someone like him has a wife, and he didn't really talk about it. Charlie seemed to be feeling guilty. He was even shaking a little. The atmosphere became awkward, and Charlie decided it was time to change the subject. He searches all the dungeons, does all the dirty work. Because of this, all the clan members left. Charlie felt ashamed that he had dragged Hank into this. But Hank asked. He was looking for the sunflower. He knows something about it. These flowers are only in those dungeons where bosses appear. It is not for nothing that they are called unique. The secret of this flower lies in this: that they need to be collected when the dungeon boss is alive, the higher the difficulty of the dungeon. That was the quality of the flower itself. He himself had never seen a single golden flower. It can only be found in a dungeon of level 7 or higher. Charlie asked Hank to stop. He thought Hank was comforting him. But Hank said and proved that this is not a consolation. He is telling the truth. He handed the leader a flower and said that this was proof of his words. Having received the desired flower in his hands, which Charlie had been looking for so many years, he began to shake. He said that he was very wrong. Everything he had done so far was looking in the wrong place. Hank said it was true, but now the leader knows where to look for them. The poor man fell to the ground and started screaming at the top of his lungs after Hank's words. The first impression of Charlie was completely different. If it weren't for his unique character, Hank wouldn't have even joined his clan. But his sincerity touched Hank. He asked the leader to stand up and said, "Since the leader is looking for the golden sunflower, he will help in any way he can. Charlie's hard work has finally paid off, and now there is hope. Dungeons have increased by 38% compared to the previous month. It seems it's time to discuss countermeasures. Doctors from the Institute say they have something. What the chief must immediately see is that they also have a shortage of hunters." But all this didn't bother the head. The only thing he was thinking about was where Hank was now. Apparently, he was irritated that Hank had refused him, and still hadn't come running to ask to join the guild. So he decided to make fun of Hank. He ordered to stop sending people to the dungeons. All they need to do is wait for reporters. If the media finds out about it, there will be a resonance. Then the chief asked that he hadn't seen Maria for a long time. Was she really in that room? The secretary replied, "No, she has a lot of meetings, so she is busy." This was unusual for her, and it irritated the dictator who wanted to control everyone. And yet he was confident that everything would be fine, because she had never let him down before. Another strange guy who worried the chief. Up to this point, there were many hunters. Those who lived and did not refuse the world's attention. Arrogant hunters. The leader was well aware of this. In the hunter exam last year, a total of 3 A-rank people were assessed. The original plan was for one hunter to attract all the attention of the people, while the other 2 would quietly and peacefully join the guild. However, the new members of the Bishop's Guild suddenly changed their minds about the Glory Guild. Relations between the guilds reached their peak, and no one could surpass the Great Guild of Glory. Power and money are the weapons that everyone strives for, and his popularity is direct proof of this. Pride, strength, ideologies of all, nothing will be an exception before power and money. The lack of value of a person gives reason to discard him like trash. It can't be that he's different from everyone else. He didn't just come here for no reason. True, everyone wants to reach for power and money. Why Hank is not like that? The boss did not understand this. Hank is already strong. When there is little water left, the thirst for drinking is crowned. The same with power. He is already a strong hunter. So what's the problem? It seems the leader was tormenting himself with these thoughts. The leader didn't understand why Hank didn't want to rise to the top of this country like he did. It's so funny to watch Hank torment this hypocrite without doing anything. Meanwhile, Hank was being stalked by some girl, okay? It looks like it was Maria. She wanted to touch Hank, but he moved away and asked, "Glory Guild again." He told her not to come. Maria said she had information for Hank, but Hank immediately replied that he was not interested. It turned out that Hank didn't immediately understand who was following him, so he asked who she was. Maria apologized for following her, then introduced herself properly. Hank didn't expect such a big shot to be keeping an eye on him. Maria apologized again and said that she had to meet him. She said she wanted to know more about Hank, but it seemed like Hank's thoughts were going in the wrong direction. He decided it was a romantic manhwa. Blue sky, city lights, plum blossoms curled up into a ball. One thing is clear. The spring of his life has come, and 2 people are looking at each other's faces. It's like we left this cruel world. Just like that, summer has come, naive guy. The blush on Hank's face became noticeable, and he touched Maria's shoulders. Maria's face also turned pink. Hank called Maria and asked, "What the hell is she up to? Stop pulling the wool over his eyes, and let her say why the hell she followed him. What a romantic Hank is." They sat down in the park, and Hank asked if the cat had managed to escape, but she had come to him because he had cured the cat. Maria said that it wasn't just any cat that escaped, but an imperial tiger. Well, Hank had expected that. He asked Maria again why she had come to him. "Not in order to tell him this wonderful news. I decided to make a scapegoat out of him." Maria answered, "Of course not. She came for another reason." She had only seen his skills once, but that was enough to understand that Hank had enough strength to restore the destroyed core. I'm sure Hank is much stronger than her, and since they are both healers, she decided, this conversation will be useful to both of them, an exchange of experience and nothing more. Hank was still unsure. Maria asked if he suspected her. Hank replied, "Of course. Everyone in Korea knows her, Saint Mary. And of course he understands that she is different from that parasite, who is at the head of their guild, but it is still part of the Glory Guild. He may be wrong about her. He will never know if she really tried to prevent that massacre. Anything is possible, but he doesn't intend to trust anyone from their rotten guild. For example, this child, he comes to this park every day with his mother, who sits on the bench and watches him play. She loves her child, and she wants to remember every moment with him, so she always carries a camera. It is not difficult to guess the train of her thoughts. The warm smile on her face says a lot. But he is interested in what St. Mary sees. She spoke about compensation. So let her tell him how she will compensate that child for his dead mother. She will give him money, a house, a comfortable future if she really feels sorry. Then the reason for her arrival should not be somehow connected with him. Meanwhile, Charlie was angry. Gideon's plan was in action and Charlie was angry. When the Glory Guild decided to pounce on Hank, Charlie decided he wasn't going to stand for it. He cannot abandon his benefactor in this trouble. Retribution is coming. But it seems Charlie was talking about hateful comments rather than actual action. It was a pathetic sight. But Charlie seemed to feel like he was defending Hank's honor. He wrote to Hank that he would sort everything out, which Hank of course did not understand. Maria stood up. Hank asked if he was leaving already. Maria admitted that her goal was selfish. Then she apologized for wasting her time and simply left. She was sorry, but she couldn't apologize. Her incompetence had ruined this beautiful place. It seemed like she was slowly going crazy again. She heard cries for help. The voices asked Mary to help them, to save them. And Mary repeated that there was no forgiveness for her. The inaction of a strong man is the gravest crime of all. She believed that every death of a person was her fault. She believed that she was obliged to save everyone. The head's voice repeated that it was not her fault. Not everything in this world could be controlled. It was impossible to save everyone, but Maria believed that her failure had caused a river of blood to flow. A healer who can't even feel pain. She believed that she had killed everyone, and she deserves to die. It is unclear how self-flagellation can help people. Since she wants to save them so much, she must act. Instead of constantly whining about how useless she was, Hank stopped her at that moment. She turned around and looked at Hank in surprise, and Hank said she had blood on her hands. But her hands were clean, which puzzled Hank, because he definitely saw blood. Maria showed the side that the boss ordered not to show, but Hank said it was just his imagination, and yet he could see it all. Sees her true essence, hidden under the guise of a saint. That evening, Maria left. Hank didn't know what was wrong, but she looked extremely pale. She also left as if she was running in fear from an old enemy. Hank was puzzled. He asked the baby to drink more carefully, otherwise he would get sick, and the baby obeyed. Then the baby thanked Hank for coming here to play with him. Hank said there was nothing to thank him for. He just came here out of boredom. But the kid knew it was a lie, but Hank told him to be quiet. But the boy asked if that wasn't St. Mary. They were dating, Hank replied, if only, which disappointed the kid. The boys chatted for a long time about everything under the sun and played together. In the morning, the doctor was telling important people about some important matters. This news will most likely cause a lot of noise, so he wants to show them what they are about to see. He presents to their attention something that will elevate their guild to unattainable heights. The poisonous poppy. That same poppy that Becky was talking about. People in the room screamed, "It's illegal." The doctor asked everyone to calm down and said that he himself knew perfectly well that it was a drug. The man shouted and still decided to voice it here. The doctor answered, "Yes." "No one can resist him anyway," the man shouted. He had completely lost his mind. At that moment, a cigarette flew at him and then simply exploded. The creepy woman asked him if he knew he wasn't supposed to raise his voice during a meeting. The man chickened out, and the guild leader, or greedy mole, told him to sit down. And he asked the doctor to continue, which is not surprising, because his condition is more important to him than the lives of people. And the madman continued. The most important thing is how they can use this drug for their own purposes. Can poisonous poppy have more pros than cons, of course? He is sure of this, the head asked. Is there evidence of his theory? The doctor replied that the increased healing abilities are a hidden effect of poppy. Considering that good healers are worth their weight in gold, they may neglect safety rules a little. The woman asked if they would use it on Maria. The leader replied, "No, Maria Samo is the personification of their guild. Stuffing her with drugs is too risky a step." The woman asked who he was going to experiment on then. Another woman said Jasper would gladly agree to all their conditions. They will tell the vice president that they want to strengthen his son's skills, and they will release news about it as a PR move. That they will begin to clear the poisonous dungeons together with the association. People started discussing this idea. Everyone had their own opinion, some were against it. Against the poisonous poppy, against the poisonous dungeons, they spoke of danger. But the mole ordered that all poisonous dungeons in Korea be checked. He ordered that the dungeons be taken away if someone had already bought them, and that everything be kept a secret from Maria. No one could object to the mole. Maybe they were afraid that he would kill them, or maybe they simply didn't want to lose money. All orders were immediately carried out, and so Charlie lost the dungeon. The permits for all the poisonous dungeons that they had were revoked. They quickly realized that the Glory Guild was involved, although they didn't know why they needed them. Hank decided to make a couple of calls, hoping he could fix something. Charlie asked if he had any connections in the association. Hank replied, something like that. The dial tone lasted forever. Finally, the phone was picked up and Hank said hello. Hell said hello and asked if something was wrong. Hank doesn't call often. Hank explained the dungeon restrictions, and Hell admitted it was strange. And Hank, of course, believed that the Glory Guild was involved in this. Hell listened attentively to Hank and made some notes. Then he promised to look into the matter, and Hank asked how long it would take. Hell replied that since he had taken on this matter, everything would be resolved quickly. There was nothing complicated about it. Little Hank was delighted and thanked Hell, but the chief was noticeably surprised. He asked who it was. Hank replied, just an acquaintance, with a very dark aura. A minute passed while the chief and Hank were talking about whether Hell could help them. And in just 1 minute they were given permission. Hell really did decide everything in one fell swoop. Even faster than Hank thought, the chief decided to get ready quickly. Hank offered to help, but the chief said that everything was fine, and Hank was left alone. Now Hank realized how good it was to have connections. Meanwhile, Jade and Hank trained. Hank had improved his skills significantly, and was no longer just a punching bag. Jade had already struck for the 100th time, but he still couldn't hit Hank. But the training wasn't over yet. Jade attacked. It seemed like a normal left punch. But in reality, Jade was aiming right at his face, and Hank was able to stop her blow. 112 punches, and Hank was able to block all of Jade's punches. Jade decided to attack again, but Hank was able to predict this too. He dropped sharply. But Jade believed that this was not enough. This was not the limit of Hank's capabilities. Jade attacked furiously and quickly, but Hank was able to dodge and jump back. Hank ran away because he was tired, but it seemed like he was about to fall. However, his teacher had no intention of stopping. He asked Hank, "What is he doing?" Hank's reaction is too slow. Jade was serious. Hank was shaking with fatigue, and Jade asked what was wrong. He was not going to attack anymore. Hank's shirt was completely soaked, and he said that maybe he still had some strength left. Then Jade was satisfied and told Hank to get into position. Jade said he would start from the beginning. He seemed to enjoy the battle with Hank. He said he hoped at least one punch would land on his smug face today. It seems that these two were quite angry. Their battle raised huge clouds of dust. Chuck and Becky were watching from the sidelines, and Chuck asked if they were finished yet. He has a deal coming up here. He asked for an additional fee for every minute. Since when did this kid get so strong? Chuck asked. But Hank wasn't listening to Chuck at all. He was focused on the battle. But Jade said Hank was too slow. Let him start again. Hank could use his speed much better, Jade advised. His body would be more exhausted if Hank watched through his movements. He would have already defeated him long ago. Hank got serious and shouted, "Today, he will definitely strike." How fierce Hank looked, and Jade finally started to fight for real. Jade said, "Of course he will hit, but only when he can find him." Then Jade created a couple of clones, but Hank had no trouble finding him. Hank was already used to this trick of Jade's. He immediately approached him. Hank's blow caused an explosion. Becky shouted what happened. Who won? Chuck replied. It looked like they had a draw. The smoke cleared. Hank was still standing. But Jade was still standing. Hank looked more exhausted. A tired Hank thought. Considering it was Chuck's words, it could be considered a compliment. There were 178 blows in total. None of them hit him. Hank seems disappointed. He put so much effort into this training. He let out a disappointed sigh and Jade said, "He's amazing." Hank was surprised and asked what Jade just said. Jade answered. Exactly what he said. He has nothing more to teach Hank. The student has surpassed the teacher. Jade congratulated Hank for mastering the instant jump. Hank ruined the sweet moment by asking if Jade was just tired of teaching him. Jade replied, "No, from now on Hank will continue training on his own. He no longer sees the point in teaching him anything else. It will only hinder his growth." Jade hid his trembling hands behind his back. Hank's talent was terrifying. He, like Hank, has a rare talent, but Hank is many times superior to him. Jade said Hank did a great job. His role as a teacher is over. Hank will encounter many people, those who are out to get him. And with those who will be eaten up by envy, different people will enter his life and will torment him. However, he hopes that Hank will never forget about the people around him. It was time to return to where they came from, even if only for a short while. But it was an honor to be his teacher, Jade thought. Then Hank knelt down and thanked his master for the lessons. Jade told Hank to get up. He must have been hiding his joy behind a gloomy face. He said that you can't call just anyone a master. He was only playing the role of a teacher. However, Hank didn't even think of getting up. He continued to show him respect. Then Jade smiled sweetly and said, "Hank is stubborn until the very end. It was a wonderful time. He wishes his student good luck in the war." Meanwhile, in the Guild of Glory, an experiment was being conducted in the laboratory. Jasper was the lab rat. The doctors surrounded him and took his blood. Jasper lay there and thought about how much pain he was in, and didn't understand why he was there. Then he remembered that some kind of experiment was being conducted on him. The doctor was beside himself with joy. Having received new material, what was the point of all this? The doctor asked. Had he already woken up? The drug's effect was about to wear off, but the doctor didn't want to stop at all. And yet it had to be done. The doctor told his subordinates to wrap it up. Then everyone gathered around Jasper and, on the doctor's orders, began to clap. While the doctor was talking about something, Jasper looked at these suction cups and thought, "This lunatic stuck these things into him," the doctor said. "A little more, and Jasper would get an A rank." Finally, Jasper said that he had enough of the experiments. He didn't even know what exactly they were doing to him. He was scared and didn't want to take part in it anymore. But the doctor prolonged it. He suggested continuing tomorrow. Jasper said that the doctor was doing all this out of greed. After all, he always remained in second place. It's time to admit that none of them are destined to take the place of the winner. One doctor wanted to protect a madman, but he killed him without even looking at him. Then he asked what the young master wanted then. Wasn't it him? He wanted to get rid of Hank, so why does he say he wants to end the experiment? It was all a lie. Jasper screamed in shock at what the doctor had just done. But the psycho told him to shut up and asked again what Jasper wanted. Jasper thinks why this one died is because he was getting on his nerves. No, because he is weaker than him. Weaklings do not survive in this world. He began to manipulate Jasper. He admitted that he wanted to kill his colleague out of envy. He was glad that Jin had disappeared because of the death threat, and he was here. This was the only way he could be in first place, and he believed that this made him great. He continued to pull the wool over Jasper's eyes and put pressure on him. He hinted that he had gotten rid of more than one genius hunter, reminding Jasper of the crowd, which rejoiced not at him, but at Hank. Hank's voice, the face, the grin of this freak. Greed slowly filled Jasper's heart, and then completely filled his soul. Meanwhile, our team was heading to another dungeon. But they had a new addition. Becky was also going to go with the guys. The chief asked who it was. Then Becky said hello, and said that she was the slow-witted man's guardian. Then the chief looked at Hank. Hank himself did not react in any way. And so the chief decided that Becky was indeed his guardian and bowed to her. Hank was already tired of this circus and asked if she had decided to stalk again. Or maybe there was a more important reason. Becky avoided his gaze, which gave the answer. She tried to lie, but Hank's creepy look was unstoppable. Then she lost it and started screaming. Couldn't she just take a walk with him? The two started arguing, and the leader waited patiently for them to finish. But in the end, I decided to ask why they had gathered here today. Hank replied, "Of course, in order to clear the dungeon. It's time to kill a couple of monsters." The leader looked around and asked, "There is no dungeon here, so why are they here?" He knew Hank was unusual, but he didn't think it would be this bad. Hank asked the old man to calm down. If the prediction was correct, he would appear now. "It's already 37 minutes. The chief asked what prediction Hank was talking about. And at that moment, a poisonous dungeon appeared behind the head. Becky asked if he had told the truth and what they should do. Chuck didn't lie. The dungeon appeared. Hank admitted that it was incredible. The chief asked if Hank knew a fortune teller. Hank replied no. It was just a very evil old man who helped. Becky said that the fortune teller made a deal with them. They proposed to predict the emergence of poisonous dungeons. And they came here to check out this rare phenomenon. Hank decided to go there alone. The most important thing would be tomorrow, so let them rest. The chief took off his equipment and asked why tomorrow. Hank replied, "The dungeon will rise to the 7th rank. The fortune teller said so." The woman asked the manager to repeat himself. It seemed she had heard incorrectly. The guy apologized. The woman said she was tired of apologies. Let him clearly repeat what he said. The guy said that it was some kind of seedy clan. He took away their rights to the dungeon, and the woman got angry. The guy got nervous and shouted that he would take his license back. Because the association suddenly changed its mind, the woman interrupted him. She asked, "He knows that this project didn't work out from the very beginning. Losing in such a situation is simply ridiculous. Their image will never be restored. He has no shame. This clan must be making fun of them." The guy begged for another chance to fix everything, but the woman said, what she wanted to hear was not an apology, but an analysis of the reason for the loss, and proposals for solving the current problem. The crazy woman attacked the guy. It was as if she sucked the life out of him and told him to think it over. The madwoman didn't kill him. She read the reports on the clan and said that they had become bolder lately. She learned that there were only 2 people in this clan, but she didn't yet know who the second person was. "How do they even exist?" she asked, then said that one shouldn't talk about those like that. Whoever took away their rights to the dungeon, she became interested in the cleansing clan. The next day, the 7th rank dungeon was ready. Hank asked Becky to drink the antidote. The others got ready too. Then Hank said they were ready. They entered the dungeon. A smoky smell, vibrations, thick poison all around. Monsters of incredible size. In front of them, Hank looked like a bug. But this thick poison everywhere made Hank happy. He could inhale this poison deeply. Hank said happily how refreshing it was, and wasn't at all worried about the giant. The giant roared and threw his huge spear towards Hank. However, Hank himself was no longer there. He was standing behind this giant. As soon as the monster turned around, Hank cut him into 2 pieces in an instant. The black ether has increased, meaning it can absorb even rank 7 poison. But still, this is a 7th rank dungeon. The speed and strength of the monsters are different. There are a lot of them, so if they surround Hank, it will be difficult. But he is glad that they still can't match his speed. It was worth it. Hank began his hunt. The monsters threw spears at him. The boys watched the battle from afar, the leader admiring how bravely Hank fought. Even though Hank was a healer, he had never seen anything like this before, and the leader was angry. Why was Hank fighting so hard and he couldn't help him? Becky asked. Was he so vulnerable? Is her own powerlessness really bothering her? She said Hank said he would do everything himself. The boss will only interfere if he can't help. It's better to stay out of the way. After all, they can't do anything now. All they can do is wait. Then the boss resigned himself. Becky was right. Hank really didn't need their help. Hank just changed the state of his dagger and it turned into a huge sword. Now it was time for the monsters to get nervous. They were saying something in their own language. And at that moment, Hank jumped up and swung his sword in front of their faces. The monsters didn't have time to do anything. Hank easily chopped off their heads. And the monsters nearby threw their spear at Hank. But Hank noticed it. And immediately he changed the state of the dagger. It fell apart, providing Hank with support. With the board capable of landing on it, Hank used it as a flying skateboard. He flew back from the blow. The monsters were strong, but they didn't know how to work as a team. If Hank fights, avoiding their blows, he will win without even breaking a sweat. There was still plenty of airtime, so Hank decided to try again. He ran over the monster's weapon, then moved his dagger up. And again he changed the state of the dagger into a huge sword and prepared to strike. But this time, Hank decided to show off and use dual mode. Apparently, he wanted to use the perfect moment to kill 2 at once. No, actually, Hank decided to kill all the monsters at once. The monster decided to hit Hank, but Hank was no longer there. He was already on the ground. This time Hank didn't use any illusion tricks. Hank was actually able to attack every monster that was in front of him. The monsters' heads began to fall to the ground as Hank walked past them. Hank felt it. What the fortune teller said was true. He said that if there was a golden flower nearby, Hank would be able to sense it instinctively. It is impossible to find him on such a big mountain, but his premonition tells him the exact location of the flower. It is truly a legendary flower, the beauty of which is mesmerizing, but it is not golden. What's also strange is that the dungeon boss is nowhere to be seen, even though he's supposed to be protecting the flower. At that moment the earth shook, the birds flew away, and Hank froze. Hank wondered if an earthquake had started, if it was the second wave. No, it feels completely different. It feels like something incredibly huge is approaching. Although those monsters were also large, the leader and Becky trembled with fear. A huge boulder flew at Hank, but he managed to jump away. The boss showed up and now the guys were in no mood for jokes, even Hank. The monster looked like an armored titan, and it was huge. This was not a mountain, but a monster. Hank only now realized why the mountain looked strange. This will take some tinkering. Hank asked the system to show information about him. The monster has the skill of unwaveringness, so it can block physical attacks. This is because the boss's body is made of franium, which is a deformed substance. To this day, franium is known as the most durable material. It cannot be deformed by ordinary physical force. But he can melt it, which means Hank still has a chance to win. Hank had about half the airtime left, so he didn't have time to think about it. As the monster began to attack, the boss threw a huge boulder again. A huge amount of smoke rose up, and the chief was worried that Hank had been hit. That's what happened, but Hank healed himself. Hank admitted that the monster was strong. He really thought he was going to die, so he attacked Hank and blew up his own body. It seems that fighting from a distance is not the best idea. The monster can regenerate. Hank changed the shape of the dagger. The hit-and-run strategy has never failed. No matter what rank the monster is, even it can't survive the constant onslaught of Hank's sword attacks. Hank used a poisonous move. The chief watched Hank and was impressed. Incredibly, Hank rushed into battle without a moment's hesitation, the leader thought. Even though he is the head of a small clan, he is still a veteran. He realized that Hank is stronger than ordinary hunters. As soon as he saw him, but he didn't expect this. If he had been there, he would have been able to fight as well. While the chief was thinking about this, Becky noticed it, but said nothing. Meanwhile, Hank continued to attack the monster, but there was not a scratch on the monster. The monster is strong. It's all because of the franium. Hank tried everything while hitting him. But its regeneration speed is too fast to defeat. We need to destroy the franium and strike the core. While Hank is changing modes, he will already have time to recover. It would be more convenient if someone else destroyed the franium. But he couldn't ask those two. Hank decided that he had to handle it alone. And what's even more of a problem is that he didn't expect his sword to be able to withstand the blows. The presenter introduced a rising star, a hunter who was awarded the B rank. Because of the amount of ether, his abilities exceed A rank. Charlie was a very promising hunter, and at first everything went great. No, to be honest, Charlie was doing just fine. He wasn't an SS rank hunter. However, everyone recognized him, and popularity did not pass him by. He certainly had nothing to complain about in life, especially because he had a wife whom he valued more than anything in the world. May 14th is their anniversary, but Charlie has been called away on urgent business. He apologized for this, but Sally did not worry. She said that she would wait for him. Charlie hugged his beloved and promised to return as soon as possible. But Charlie returned to a destroyed house. The life of these beautiful lovers was destroyed. From that very day, Charlie began to search for this legendary flower. Hank managed to destroy the protective barrier. Now it's time to attack. He used white sleep. Hank was sure that this time everything went smoothly. Hank didn't even doubt it, but the protective layer had already managed to recover. Well, it's time for Hank to admit he was being optimistic. He still has 2 more tries left. Not much. You have to be careful, because the dagger is about to break. Hank was too distracted to block the monster's attack. This monster is faster than Hank thought. Why exactly when every attack counts? Now he has only 1 attempt left. He needs to find a way to turn the situation to his advantage. But what can he do at the moment? The airtime is already running out. And the X can activate the White Dream only once, so how can he get through its protective layer? You can't overdo it, otherwise it will kill him. First you need to understand. Can Hank even handle this monster on his own? He cannot spend his last attack as a support attack. His thoughts were interrupted by the leader's shout. Hank turned around and saw that the leader was dragging a tree. No idea what the boss is trying to do, but I need to tell him to get out of there. But the leader simply threw a tree at the monster. But will he be able to hit it? Or he tries to change the direction of his hand. This is also pointless. No, his original target wasn't the boss, but Hank himself. Well, that's still better. Rather than get hit by this monster, Hank just has to endure it. The boss didn't try to do anything with him, since it was easier to move Hank than such a colossus. And it worked. Now Hank realized that the problem was that Hank was trying to deal with the monster alone. Then Hank called the chief and shouted. It seemed to him that he could handle him himself. But he was wrong. He needs the chief's help. He regrets that he didn't trust the chief. The leader waited for Hank to give him permission to join, adding Charlie to the plan. Hank was given many choices, but in such an urgent situation. He needs to discard all the options that are now less effective, and the only one that remains, handing over the X shard to Charlie, will inevitably result in him taking damage. Even though it is a blade fragment, it is still imbued with dark ether. It was hot as hell. Charlie was surprised that Hank had been using this weapon all this time. But he will endure, because now he will finally be able to help Hank. Hank warned the chief about the monster's leg. The explosive beam was even in the leg, not just in the arm. They are clearly missing some detail. The monster attacked with a beam. Then Hank immediately ran to the chief. It seemed the chief was normal. But Hank still asked if the boss was okay, and the boss replied, yes. It's strange, but he's completely intact. It feels like his whole body has become lighter. Becky shouted. Even though the idiots had SS ranks, their brains had been completely blown out in the battle. And if they died, what would happen to the flower? And Charlie should know how to control himself. He's an adult already. Complex stealth techniques are primarily used by high-class espers. However, it is of little use in dungeons, so only a few people resort to it, especially spies. It helps you emerge victorious in a fight where you are highly likely to lose, and makes the weak stronger. And it multiplies the ether many times over and enhances the work of the brain. A force that turns everything in your favor. Little Becky saved those fools by shouting at them to take care of themselves during the fight. Hank laughed and said, well, looks like Becky didn't expect that. It was only then that Becky noticed the rainbow emanating from her. It seemed like Becky had been using her power without even realizing it. This girl continues to surprise Hank. The boss called Hank, and he looked at him. The fight was not over yet. The monster approached the guys again and prepared to attack. The difference in time created by the swing of a weapon is the essence of teamwork. To make up for the time lost, Hank's movements are beyond imagination. Hank decided to clear the way for them. The main thing was that Charlie didn't fall behind. Charlie replied, no problem, he just had to keep up with Hank. The monster got angry and started throwing stones from its body at the boys. Hank and Charlie deftly dodged the rocks, but the monster began to shoot from its hand. Then Hank shouted to the chief not to think about stopping. "We need to run." The explosion sent up a wall of smoke, but the boys were okay. They were lucky. The fact that Becky is protecting the guys has an incredible effect on this bat. Charlie never thought that an ability he had only heard about would be so powerful. Hank said, as he had already said, the effect would not last long. Becky had only recently woken up. So there is no time to waste. This power can be compared to a candle. They do not know when exactly it will go out. Just like the time Hank summoned the snake, Becca's condition worsened. It must be because she can't control her powers. Then Hank needs to increase his speed even more. It wouldn't hurt for him to get a couple of new abilities. The monster was throwing stones. They almost got there, but the boulders kept flying. The boss only became more enraged, and for a second Charlie thought they were finished. But he quickly dismissed this thought, because nothing is known yet. This is not the end. Charlie yelled to Hank that he would try to clear the way, when suddenly the line hit every boulder, and a second later, all the boulders simply exploded. Charlie didn't even have time to jump. Hank dealt with the boulders, Charlie thought. Hank was always this strong. Surprisingly, Hank definitely deserves respect. He tries to do everything to clear the way for them. To make Charlie do what he must, Hank risks himself for him. He has no choice but to do it. He put all his ether into this blade. To destroy the protective barrier, their labors finally bore fruit. They managed to reach the core of the dungeon boss. Great job. And then it was necessary to help poor Becky, who had used up all her strength. Charlie was happy that they were able to complete the 7th tier dungeon, and Hank praised Charlie for his work. After all, most people die just by touching this blade. They just burn up. Well, Charlie didn't know that, so he asked Hank. And Hank decided to give this blade to him. Hank said that he believed in Charlie. The main thing is that they finished the dungeon, but the leader didn't know that the boss was still alive. He seemed to have forgotten that if he killed the boss, the flower would die with him. Hank climbed onto the monster and said the one they killed was a difficulty 8. And since they are the first to discover this, it's time to throw a real feast. Hank bit his finger, and one drop of his blood fell into the monster's core, the poison causing the monster's entire body to tremble. Yet Hank's poison is incredibly strong. The boss, comparable to an unshakable fortress, died from a single drop of blood. The leader was very grateful to Hank. For him, Hank was like a savior, which changed his life. But sometimes, this guy scares the hell out of him. It was time to stop. Sally came to this decision after 5 years of reflection. They didn't know the reason. What an unanswerable phrase, especially from the doctor's lips. But it wasn't strange. The news was always talking about dungeon breakthroughs and other things. As the world changed, many things emerged that were beyond the control of doctors. Just like Sally, conscious but motionless, she can't move. But she could see and hear. She could not answer. But she knew his efforts, plans for her salvation. The situation in the clan, and his thoughts about her death. He did not talk about it, but she knew how much he suffered. She had never seen his silent tears until today. The only reason for this is her death. Sally remembered their first meeting. How sweetly he asked for her phone number, how they walked together. Their happy moments in life, of which there were so many. Sally didn't think she deserved him. She knew how hard he tried for her. But if she could, she would like to experience it one more time. A couple of people approached her room. They were talking about some kind of operation. Sally thought it seemed like the time had come. She thought about her husband. He wouldn't hear her. She continued to talk nonsense that she didn't deserve him. Sally prepared herself for death and thanked her husband for being there all this time. She never even dreamed of this moment, but a miracle still happened. It's a miracle this wonderful couple deserves. Life has returned to Sally. A sparkle came into his eyes, and Charlie continued to cry loudly and ask his beloved for forgiveness. He was finally able to hug his wife and apologize for being 5 years late. They couldn't hold back their tears. Both of them were crying loudly, and Hank and Jade stood nearby. Hank was happy, as was Jade. Jade said that Charlie was a very lucky guy. And he was right. There are a lot of things that people try to protect, but nothing works out for them. Our hero helped this couple reunite. He is a true hero, just like Charlie, who did not give up for so many years. Meanwhile, Chuck was standing in front of a huge tombstone when suddenly Becky's voice was heard. She said she was wondering where he was. She likes looking at monuments. He has a strange hobby. Chuck looked at her. Becky said, she came back. Chuck asked if 7 stars were true. Becky said yes. He sent him the video. So later he can see for himself. Chuck answered clearly and pulled out 1 petal. He said that this mission would cost 32 million. She tried hard for the sake of her dad's duty. Now she can live freely, something Becky and I didn't expect. Chuck turned out to be not such a bad person. She called Chuck father, but Chuck said he was not her father. Now he was just Chuck. Then Becky asked if it was really all over, and Chuck said yes. Then he took the ring off the necklace and gave it to Becky. It has a big story. Tied to her, Becky didn't understand anything. She asked why she could be free. Chuck said that if he wanted information, he had to pay first, even though the information was priceless. And Hank was at home with his sister. They were eating ice cream together, and they were very happy because they ate all sorts of cheap stuff all the time. But this ice cream, it's so cool that it's impossible to stop. Some kind of mini robot flew up. He reported that the user certification was completed, which was exciting. Just as Hank was asking if it was dangerous, Gene appeared on the screen. And immediately he started screaming. Sonny asked who this dumpling-like man was. Hank said that the doctor had helped him a lot, then asked Gene what had happened. He heard the lab had moved, Gene said. He'd been following the news about Hank. Hank became much stronger. Hank became embarrassed and said that it was all thanks to the doctor. It's just a video recording. Jin decided to get down to business. The X was created in a hurry, so now her durability might be at an end, and he feels like Hank has a lot of questions for him. Gene sent the new address of the lab, as he had contacted Hank in time. Finally, we saw Carrie. She seemed to be enjoying being back in Korea. This building definitely contains the Glory Guild laboratory. It exploded. She didn't have time for such nonsense. She asked if this child could handle everything.